I'm Taz Riot, the King of Freeport, and I'm here with David Williams, the Prime Minister of the Dominion of Melchizedek. And we're here today to talk about coming out of the system and people doing their own things. This is only for people involved with Freeport. It is not for public release or public consumption, as quite frankly most American people are too much of an idiot to understand. And quite frankly, most people couldn't handle this knowledge anyway.
Well, the first thing about any kind of knowledge is they have to care. And, you know, what people think today is normal, and, quote, the normal world that they live in is not what people lived in 200 years ago. All the distractions that are here now were not there. So people spent their time reading, studying by candlelight, whatever. And in particular, the founders of the USA. I mean, these men were not just prolific readers of international law and all law, Blackstone's commentaries or anything else. They were also prolific writers. And like, if you look at Thomas Jefferson's writings and the notes on the state of Virginia, you can find it at virginia.edu. You can also buy books that are written as partial biographies or not really an autobiography. But I don't know that Jefferson did an autobiography, but Adams did. But the interesting thing about all that period of time is, even when they did their writings, people want to say, well, this is hard, and look at what it costs, and look at what you have to do, and those kind of things. I'm like, are you kidding me? These men fought a war. These men fought a war, but even when they did their readings and their studies and their note taking or whatever, they didn't have ballpoint pens. No. They had a quill and an inkwell.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Look how much longer it took just to write a note to someone. And yet, the volumes and volumes and volumes of material that these men produced were unbelievable.
Well, and one of the biggest misconceptions that a lot of people have is that the Constitution was done for them, that they're a party to it, that they have rights. And you and I both know that's total bullshit. They're not a signatory to the compact, they're not part of the contract. Take a look, even 1854, the Padelford case, you and I both know it very well. You're not a signatory to the compact.
The judge said so, right to Padelford, told him it's clear that the Constitution is a compact, and equally clear you're not a party to it. So it was like the question I was just asked on Sarah Westhall's radio program, or podcast, or whatever you call it on the internet now. So how do people, what is the tie then? If they're not party to the contract, then how does it govern over them? Like, because they took an oath and allegiance to it.
Yeah.
Whether by acquiescence, the law of nations specifically says that children follow the condition of their parents.
Yep.
And I tell people all the time, they're like, well, we're all born free.
No, you're
and I'm
not.
like, excuse me, do you think any of the so-called Hebrew slaves were going, yeah, we were born slaves, but when you were born, son, you were born free.
No, it's bullshit.
Same thing with black African slaves that were here in the 1800s. Not a single one of them said, yes, massa. Oh, son.
Yes, massa. Right away, master.
This is my massa right here, but you don't have a massa. You born free.
Yeah.
Come on,
bullshit.
really? I mean, this is crazy to kind of have this attitude. And by the way, I'm not trying to mock black people by talking that way. They talk that way because they were kept dumbed down as a slave. Their speech was very broken when it came to speaking the English language. They weren't from this culture to begin with. And it wasn't handed down to them until later. That it's kind of like watching this movie, Belle. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw this or not. It was a movie about the first black African nobility in Britain. And this is when Lord Mansfield made one of his most tremendous rulings ever in relationship to ownership. And this is when slavery was literally, that kind of personal slavery was being unraveled. And look, I'm not saying that the slave trade ain't going on today around the world. I think it's probably...
No, it is.
But the more prolific thing that came out of the things like the Bretton Woods Agreement and the report from Iron Mountain is that they admitted that they were going to create and had to create a more sophisticated form of peonage.
Yeah.
Well, that peonage is debt. the borrower is a slave to the lender. It's just axiomatic. And now every nation on the planet is called a debtor nation. And yet they'll say things in the U.S. like, well, we owe the debt to ourselves.
No,
I'm like,
you don't.
You ought to just shoot yourself for making that comment. How do you owe a debt to yourself? That's just totally retarded kind of thinking. And then you have case law after case law after case law that says that the Federal Reserve is not part of the United States government. It is a private corporation. So what that boils down to is the United States, like every other nation in the world, if they have their own independent monetary system where they have their own currency, they are literally renting that currency.
Yeah.
And the tax is the tax you pay for the rental agreement on the currency.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason it becomes a rental agreement or a bond, a bondage, slavery, is because literally they don't print you any money or give you any more digits on your computer until you write them a bond pledging your good faith and credit.
Yeah.
So the entire nation state is in debt, and therefore every citizen is in debt, and they, quote, owe their fair share, whatever the government deems that fair share to be. And if they've deemed that you should pay more than somebody else, you got no say-so in it because you're a slave.
Well, yeah, you take a look at the word citizen in the dictionary. It literally means property of or belonging to. So if you're a citizen of the U.S., you're property of or belonging to the U.S. You're not...
The word of itself means to belong.
Exactly.
It's, and
you're their property.
They use that word belong very judiciously when they say you belong to us.
Yeah.
You are one of ours. I've even had people that have had their children when they were married, and one was from Texas, one was from Canada.
Mm-hmm.
They've gone through customs and they had problems with their kids, like getting their citizenship straight or whatever. And they're like, well, they need to go with us. And the customs agent just told them, said, no, actually, those children belong to us.
Yeah, in your DVD set, it's the expatriation part. On, I think it's disc 3.
The extrication series is probably the best series on there because I talk about the tricks and traps of getting out of the system and not doing it properly. And properly means doing it in accordance with treaty, and not doing it in accordance with, you could be dual, all the paradigms out there. You could be dual, you need to go to an embassy, you need to be on foreign soil, you need to renounce your citizenship and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to do any of that. There's actually no requirement for anybody to officially go renounce their citizenship. And it warns you in the State Department's website that if you do it without having acquired foreign citizenship already, or foreign status already, then you're going to end up stateless, which is like the worst condition you could possibly be in. Because if you're stateless and they decide to arrest you, there's no one to come to your defense.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, men have long ago they can't live up to himself, and you have to learn that no man is an island, and you have to operate in unison for those of like mind that are trying to accomplish and want to have the same kind of standing and privileges and so forth, immunities, I shouldn't say privileges, immunities, that you want to have, because that doesn't exist in the U.S. system. I like it when it says the citizens have privileges and immunities, and I'm like, no, they have privileges, and those were granted, and they can be ungranted.
Well, yeah, because if they were rights, you know, and that's one of the big things is people keep talking about, oh, I've got constitutional rights. Well, excuse me, if that was really true, which we both know it's not, but just for argument's sake to point out rights here, if that was true, they could not regulate or control who could not buy a firearm, drive an automobile, things like that. Because in fact, they would be right. They would be something that couldn't be taken away. But yet, we all know that's exactly what they do. They regulate it, they tax it, they control it.
Except for violations of international law. Go back to that, I want to finish up that conversation, but except for violations of international law, dignitaries have their persons and their effects are all inviolable. They cannot be arrested. Now,
yeah.
They did just name 14 Cuban dignitaries persona non grata for whatever reason, and they kicked them out. They've done the same thing with Russia. And Russia did, of course, a quid pro quo, and a quid pro quo, and they kicked out U.S. ambassadors from Russia. But understand, those people have never exercised self-determination.
No.
In the sense of getting out and doing expatriation and forming something new. They're just paid. They're hitmen. They're paid to do their job.
Yeah. Well,
so in the world of trying to get back to what I was anyway, we'll just go forward. I'll come back to what there was something I was talking about. I wanted to make a point on.
Well, and something else too is most people assume that in order to come out of the system that you have to, that's something that you as the individual citizen have to do. And it's like, no, that's something that is done by your government that you're going to, directly dealing with the one that you came from. Like, for example, if somebody came on board Freeport, it is not their job or their responsibility to contact the American embassy and say, hey, I changed citizenship. It is the job and the responsibility of the government of Freeport to do that.
Well, not unless they're delegated authority to do it on behalf of the state, or if the state has not done it, like say the Minister of Foreign Affairs or whoever's supposed to be handling that position to make those contacts. Yeah, that's what we were talking about. We were talking about coming out of the system. The tricks and traps is renunciation, basically you're thumbing your nose at the state. And even then, under the treaties that were done on nationality. They did a convention on nationality in 1933 in Uruguay, and it says specifically in there that once you undergo a naturalization process before the competent authorities of another jurisdiction, you lose the nationality of origin.
Yeah.
Well, there goes duality out the window. If you lose your nationality of origin, there's no such thing as duality.
No, because the only one that makes a difference is where you're a national of.
It says once you undergo that naturalization process, you lose the nationality of origin.
Right.
It has to be before the competent authorities. Now in Article 2 it just says that the naturalizing state shall notice back the originating state. So even if you renounce your citizenship on foreign soil, you still have to have a state that finishes up that naturalization process,
and
they notice back the other one. Otherwise, they don't have to accept your renunciation.
Right.
And they can just leave you stateless, and then they can do with you whatever they want to, or they can leave you. If you did it on foreign soil and you didn't have their statehood, and you can't rely on U.S. statehood, you're now busted. You're going to prison on foreign soil, or whatever's going to happen to you.
Right, and this is exactly why the whole sovereign citizen bullshit part of my language here doesn't freaking work, because of the fact they're claiming that they are no longer part of the U.S., that they give up their citizenship, stuff like that, and then they'll turn around and use U.S. law, U.S. regulations, and things like that to try to argue their case. And it's like, well, excuse me, wait a minute. If you, and I don't think any of them do this, but even if they did legally give up their citizenship and stuff like that, you're still bound by the jurisdiction in which you were found.
Well, that is international law. From 1928 in the Sixth International Conference of American States, held in Havana, Cuba, they literally said foreigners, while traveling in the territory of another jurisdiction, enjoy the same civil rights as are granted to nationals.
Right.
Whatever is granted. And granted, there again,
can be taken away.
Well, all you have to do is look. There's a document I have. I don't think you have it. I should send it to you. Coolidge just found it recently down in Australia. And it's all about the doctrine of pater patri, not just parents patri, but pater patri, which means the daddy, the king, the daddy state, the king. And it has to do with care and protection of idiots, lunatics, and persons non compos mentis.
Yeah, persons of unsound mind.
Well, that language is exactly written into the United States Code at Title 1, Chapter 1, Section 1. Mm-hmm. Insane person includes every idiot, lunatic, and person non compos mentis.
Yeah, so, and yet when you hire an attorney, guess what you just admitted?
You just admitted that you're incompetent to handle your affairs.
Exactly.
So now you become a ward, and so the whole thing is that they're looking at the entire pater patri doctrine is looking at an entire population going, well, we have to protect these idiots from themselves because it says that ignorance of the law is no excuse. They're all ignorant. So it's amazing when you look around, like, I don't know, what happened in New Orleans when the Katrina hit. What is unique about New Orleans and where those people live? They're called wards.
Yeah.
The whole place is a ward. Ward 1, Ward 3, Ward 9. Ward 9 was the one that was destroyed and not rebuilt.
Yep.
The whole place is called a ward. Because the whole doctrine is that there's nobody in here in the whole city that's got any competence. We had to make them all wards.
Well, and the other thing is, too, people automatically assume that the U.S. is a big landmass, not just a jurisdiction. And we both know that that's not the case. It's all about jurisdiction. It's not about landmass.
It's all about what's written on paper and what's agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
And so jurisdiction stems from the paper. I mean, we had one of our guys that went into court when we were doing Unity States of our World, and we filed treaties with the Universal Postal Union. Now, he ended up dishonoring me. There was 21 of us. Russell dishonored everyone. But the last time he was in court, I'm sorry, not the last time, the next to the last time he was in court that I know of was when I testified at his trial. And of course, I was mad that they weren't charging him with violations of international law for what he really did, but they ran acquiescence on him for not showing up to a grand jury.
Yeah.
And they put him in jail for 6 months. That was all based on my testimony because, you know, he even called me up and said, well, I just want you to know I don't have anything against you for testifying against me. And I'm like, what, you expected me to lie?
Yeah.
You expected me to lie? I watched you get served, and the attorney asked me specifically, did you guys talk about that subpoena after the officer left? And this was an IRS CID agent. I said, yes, sir, we did.
Yeah.
So no, he can't tell me he didn't get served because he talked about it after we left. I mean, I said, the attorney had you, dude.
Yeah.
The attorney knew. You let acquiescence run, and I told you they were going to put you back in prison, and they did. But the first time he went, the judge literally came off the bench and sat down in front of him. This is after 7 months of them holding him. See, he was belligerent, and he was trying to usurp them and trying to change them. Him and David Windmiller and that whole quantum syntax, let's change the language program thing. I'm like, you don't have the authority to change their language. That's their national language. If you want to write it in a different style and call it quantum syntax or truth language or whatever you want to call it, and you've changed their style of writing, even if it's still English, you have to do a translation. Because the judges are telling them they can't read it, it's gobbledygook. So if the judge says it's gobbledygook, it's gobbledygook.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something different, whether it's Chinese, Japanese, or even English written in a different style, which is what they were doing, thinking they could fix problems with the English language and with jurisdiction by correcting the procedure of the language. You and I both know that doesn't work.
No.
If you want to form your own jurisdiction and then form your own language, hey, have at it.
Yeah.
But you still have to do a translation so that the other side can... We are mutually bound to live in honor and to communicate with each other. That's the only way that you can steward the planet properly. I mean, if you're just going to be a bunch of morons and not speak and not communicate, how do you expect to get anything done?
You can't.
So
Not without basic forms of communication.
But the judge literally came off the bench in that case, though, and sat down in front of Russell, and he told him, he said, wow, a minute ago, I was in Wisconsin, and now I'm no longer in Wisconsin. He said, that's amazing. I don't know how that happened. He said, now I'm in something called the Dihyperdistrict of North Half Carolina within the Dihyperdistrict of the Columbia within the Unity States of our world. That was the entity we established, the Unity States of our world. Now, they kept trying to claim property, change things in the U.S. I was not trying to do that. It's the only reason I rejoined with them in 2004 in trying to file. We filed a tort claim in the Supreme Court to go after the IRS for lies.
Yeah.
Well, guess what the U.S. did? Did they answer to the claim, or did they just go into acquiescence?
They wouldn't acquiesce.
Yeah, because they can't answer the claim. They know the whole system's fraud.
Yeah.
And they know that IRS records, the IRS has no positive law that's been enacted by Congress. It's all based on Title 26, and your contract to follow Title 26 is written right on your checks, right in your deposit slips. So you can't say you don't have a contract with the IRS because you have a private contract. I've had people say, well, Congress never ratified it. I'm like, no, you ratified it.
There's nothing to ratify. Literally, there's nothing to ratify because, and that's one of the big things people talk about, the 16th Amendment was never ratified. There's nothing to ratify. Acquiescence expired a long time ago. There's nothing for them to fix.
There's several reasons why, but see, they don't just get people bound down in one way by acquiescence. They bind and bind and bind into multiple contracts, multiple ways that they have. And then you still can't escape the fact that you're a citizen and you have no standing. And since Patrick Henry said the president has the power of a king, well, kings can just lop your head off with no repercussions to themselves.
Yep.
So if you don't go do what they tell you to do, they'll just throw you in prison and throw away the key. I know guys that have called me from prison that are sitting in there. Dario Bush is a prime example. This was on the website. Dario Bush was set for 6 months in jail with no arraignment. They almost froze him to death while he was in there, and they denied him his meds. But I've actually had people sit in prison and had them call me. What was there? One lady, since I did the website, she called me. She made the judge mad. He threw her in jail for contempt. You know how long she stayed in prison until she cured the contempt? 27 months. That's a prison term, 27
Yeah,
months.
it is.
What does that do to your life when you sit in a box for 27
It
months?
destroys it.
You got nothing left when you get out. You know how she got out? She was saying, well, you can't do this to me. I have constitutional rights. You can't do this. You can't do this. You can't do this. That went on for 27 months until one day somebody suggested that she just apologize to the judge.
Yeah.
She apologized to the judge, popped out the next day. Now that's what you call stubborn.
Yeah.
Okay, so going back to what happened with Russell, the judge literally told him at the end of his conversation about unity states and all that, he said, I swear if I walked out the back door, I'd be in Wisconsin, but I'm no longer in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
All because the
jurisdiction.
The prosecutor filed our paperwork, Russell's paperwork, into that court case. And the judge just looked at the prosecutor and said, you sure you want to file this in here? He said, Your Honor, we can't even get him to talk to us, because Russell wouldn't talk to him. He'd sit there forever, but never talk to him.
Yeah.
He didn't understand acquiescence either, because they already had him.
Yeah.
So until he was willing to show enough honor to have a dialogue, so the judge, but the judges take everything so literally. I mean, listen to the words.
Yeah.
Because he filed the paperwork. You sure you want to file the paperwork? Your Honor, we can't even get him to talk to us. We will do anything just to get him to talk to us.
Yeah.
You hear those words? We will do anything just to get him to talk to us. And the judge went, all right, picks up the paper, walks off the bench, set it down in front of Russell, and now they're talking.
Yep.
And of course, the last thing he told Russell after everything was said and done, I said, because Russell told me all about the 7 months he spent in prison and all that. People like to wear this stuff around like some kind of red badge of courage, you know?
And it ain't.
And I'm like, this is a red badge of lunacy.
Yeah.
This is not courage.
Well,
This is idiocy.
It's,
Joe, look at all everything I've done for all the years I've done it. I've never been charged, and they've never arrested me. Now, they have sent agents to have conversations.
yeah. They've done the same with me, but it's, how long have we known each other? Since 2012?
Something like that, yeah.
And I think both of us since then have learned quite a bit.
Well, I just had to go to a whole new level of learning international law when I took over the Dom, because all those protocols and everything that for moving forward, and doing the humanitarian aid, getting the recognitions that I've been able to get from Liberia and Haiti and DR and Uganda, and this, now Dom already had recognitions from 5, Burkina Faso, the islands of Cameroon, Nigeria, South Africa, and the Central African Republic. But we also have other recognitions that people are not aware of, and this has to do with filing with an IGO. You know how the OAS is a subset of the UN? Well, they have the same thing in the Pacific realm, and Dom filed with them, and all those countries signed off on it over there. I have that document. Now, I don't have the original of the document, but I know it was done, and I know it was done properly.
Yeah, and you have a copy of it.
But I don't worry about those kind of things right now, because the essence of building the state starts with building internally strong.
Yeah, it does.
But at the same time, getting foreign recognition is indispensable.
Yeah.
But in terms of what I said about building strong, the judge actually told Russell what actually happens when you build that state. And because when he got up from the table, he took that paperwork off the table and he said, son, if you'll contract with your own, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
Your own means those of like mind.
Yeah.
Not every lunatic and idiot out here who decides that they want to do gang shootings and drive-by shootings. And
well, yeah, and
if you're going to stay in collusion with that, and this is what I told someone the other day, and this is hard teaching. It's hard to accept these paradigms. But if you're paying taxes to go fight wars in other countries, and they shoot innocent women and children, and they rape their women, and they do those kind of things, and then all of a sudden
their blood's literally on your hand. If
you get raped, or your daughter gets raped, or your brother gets shot, or something else happens because of that, because you've supported that activity, then based on the karmic forces of the universe, why are you surprised?
Yeah, quite honestly, you had it coming.
You participated with it. You think you're absolved of guilt?
No,
because you
you're
weren't.
not.
It's like I said, it was the example I gave on the website. I remember I'm trying to remember, I think it was Omar Cameron was the one I asked the question of. I said, Omar, listen, is it moral, lawful, or legal to hire a hitman to kill your next door neighbor?
No.
Right.
It's none of those things.
Obviously. but it's okay to pay 100,000 soldiers to go do it over in Iraq based on false information and lies called, oh, they got weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah, and even that's not okay. But yet it's sold to the general public that it is.
Even if that were true, so it's okay for me to have weapons of mass destruction, but not for you to have weapons of mass destruction. So we're already at an inequality there. But the point is, Omar started laughing. I said, so okay. I said, but it is okay if you do it in mass. If you do it to your next door neighbor, it's not okay. But if you do it in mass and kill 1 million people at a time, that's called war. That's okay.
Yeah, and what else do they call that?
That is the stupidest paradigm you will ever reach. Now, here's the interesting thing about what the elite do. I don't know if you saw this. This is in a Star Trek episode.
I love Star Trek.
All the messages are there. The Earth is on a Star Trek, and Captain Kirk runs the church. Kirk runs the Enterprise.
Yeah.
So they put the messages there, but there was the judge saying that contract with your own and you'll be okay. Oh, it had to do with the wars, and it had to do with people. See, they don't want to believe that this doctrine of e pluribus unum, which means one out of many, they don't want to believe that this sticks to them. And what that means, literally, is if you're in collusion with the many, which they consider in international law one, what does it say in the rights and duties of states? The first thing it says is that the federated state is viewed as a sole person in the eyes of international law.
Well, yeah.
Which is exactly out of book number 2, section 81 in the Law of Nations. That in comparison with other nations, that nation being its own moral person, the U.S. being its own moral person, Russia being its own moral person, as it says, or whatever. I don't consider it moral, but for the sake of argument here, we'll talk about a juridical construct being a person. In regards to other nation states, the U.S. is seen as a sole person, Russia's seen as a sole person, China's seen as a sole person, or whatever. And in the real world, of the way contract works, in terms of collusion, if one's guilty, everyone's guilty. You can't get around it. You can't get past it. Now, you can correct, you can absolve the guilt, and you can come back and not be punished, because there's always a time, even in international law, where grace is extended, especially in international law, actually, where grace is extended and states are allowed to perfect themselves and repair the problems within. You and I already both know they're not repairing anything here. It's getting worse all the time.
Yeah.
So why do you want to be in collusion with it?
Well, and
what would possibly, and knowing that everything I just said is true, that your energy is being used to commit numerous atrocities around the world, and not just around the world. You and I just sat down and talked about what happened in Vegas.
Yeah.
And I didn't even pay attention to what happened. I had a friend call me and I said, all right, tell me about it. I've heard about it. So what's going on? He said, well, this guy was shooting at him from the 32nd floor. I was like, bullshit.
Yeah.
Nobody crawls up to the 32nd floor and changes all your wind patterns and all your, do you know what people look like 350 feet up in the air?
Unfortunately, I do.
They look like ants on the ground.
And
why would you even bother to do that? Anybody who was psychopath like that enough to do that, they would want to see the people hitting the ground.
Yeah.
They would want to see it.
Yeah.
So, it just, and the whole thing. So that's not the program here. But these people have chosen, this entire country, this is what got me out. This entire nation state has chosen to be slaves, to be debtors. And they don't even understand what it means.
Well, and one of the things that you mentioned before, was about being in collusion with the rape, murder, torture of people overseas. That's called, what is it? An act of war, or better yet, genocide. And not to change the topic here too much, but you take a look at, with what the alt-right is pointing out. And I'm not trying to get too much into that, but what I'm pointing out, though, is technically, if you take a look at what's being done with white people, they are being genocided, whether people admit it or not. Because they make up less than 1/10 of the world population. And the numbers are going down. For every white person that's born, there's 9 other mixed race or African American, or whatever you want to call them, that's born. And people argue, oh, that's just by accident. I don't think so.
It's just a given that as soon as any society becomes more affluent, the breeding rate goes down.
Yeah.
That's just a given. However, at the same time, as far as the quote white man is concerned, people say, well, why were they allowed to come over here and genocide the Indians? I don't know.
Well,
Why don't we see, everybody wants to go like they think they how much actual firsthand knowledge do you have of that past?
I don't.
So how can you make a judgment about it?
I can't. Nor do I try.
You don't have all the facts.
Exactly. I wasn't there.
You may have some of the facts, and you don't know which ones are true and which ones are not true. It's like Napoleon Bonaparte said, history is just a set of lies agreed upon.
Yeah.
So you don't have all the facts. But I look at karmic forces and universal principles and how that works. What happens, if you go research some of those native, quote, Native American Indian tribes or whatever, especially the Aztecs, these people were cannibals.
Yeah.
So why was this white man sent over here to crush them or kill 100 million of them or whatever? I don't know. Ask the universe. Ask whatever force you think is out there why these kind of things happen. But don't tell me that they didn't deserve it. If it happened, it happened.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so now that same thing is true in these wars that we're talking about. Maybe that's true as well. But you still can't absolve yourself of the fact that if you're in collusion with it,
you're part of it.
Look, just because they were guilty, then you don't get to come out here and you be guilty yourself.
Yeah.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
No.
So the participation with these forms of genocide or whatever you want to call it, war, murder, hiring hitmen to go do a job for you.
Yeah.
Using your energy to get the job done, however that works. Okay. We're talking about the universality of things. And like with the Indian tribes, there was a lot of them that were cannibalistic.
Mm-hmm.
So, why did these things happen? I don't know, but I'm not here to judge it. As a matter of fact, none of this stuff, it's like going back and down this path with Sarah in these pre-recorded radio programs and stuff that I'm doing. I'll talk about the history all you want to, and I'm going to show you through phonetics in different ways how these different tribal factions spread around, how the phonetics spread around, all the corruption in the languages to get people not knowing what words are coming out of their mouth, all these lies. Now, I don't call them deceptions. Everybody wants to call them a deception. A lie is a lie.
Yeah.
A deception is when you agree with it.
Yeah.
So all deception is self-deception because you have to have an agreement to create a deception.
Yeah.
On both sides. One that does the lying and one that believes the lie.
Yeah.
So you're now in contract with the deception as soon as you buy into it. So going back into all of this, as far as historically, how's that help me get out of Uncle Sam's Club if I'm trying to get out of Uncle Sam's Club?
It doesn't.
I need to know the procedures and protocols for making that happen. I don't need to know all the lies, all the deceptions, all the things that happened that were bad allegedly to other people and all that. I don't need to know any of that.
No,
I don't need to worry
it doesn't
about
matter.
I'm looking at it going, you talked about, quote, white or Caucasian genocide or whatever's going on. First of all, if I had to look at the last 400 years of just what's happened in the United States of America, or this land that the Indians call America, because that's where they stole the name from the Native Americans. The white Europeans, the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, the English, or whatever, they're all guilty of the last 400 or 500 years of genocide.
Yeah.
So why do they expect that this wouldn't be happening to them now, or to their children now, or anything? Why would they expect that this wouldn't happen?
Right. Well, and
so I don't judge. Like I said, I'm not here to judge and question those things. I'm looking for people of like mind that want to do something different on this planet, that are tired of the war and don't want to be in collusion with it. All this anger, all this rage, all this whining, griping, complaining, it solves nothing.
Exactly.
And it's actually all a violation of the law of nations, because under Article 32, it says that those things are just murmur and sedition.
Yep.
So now that you've murmured and been guilty of sedition, now that puts you back in a different boat, because, and this is where the elite are. The elite look at everybody that gets into that mode, whining, griping, and complaining. That's what children do. If you want to be a man, if you want to assume your separate and equal station on the planet, then assume the station.
Yeah.
And
step up and do it.
Do it and stop complaining about it.
Yeah.
Because you know what? The complaining ain't going to solve anything anyway.
Well, and kind of the reason why I even brought that up is because from where I'm sitting, I deal a lot with white nationalism, white separatists, stuff like that. And the biggest thing I see in that community is people of like mind coming together for a common purpose, to achieve a common goal. Mm-hmm. And they're willing to put their lives and their reputation, everything else on the line for what they believe in. It's the same exact principle as the right of self-determination. They're putting their lives, their fortune, their sacred honor on the line. And they're all of like mind. They want the same things. And it's interesting to see that when you point that out to people, they, oh, no, that's not the case at all. And yet the similarities are exactly the same.
Who's saying it's not the case?
Some of their own.
Well, the only thing I would draw any conclusion about, and I don't have enough information to make a judgment necessarily, but what's being intimated here to me is those are the ones that don't want peace.
Yeah.
And the right of self-determination is under peaceful settlement.
Yeah.
We all live on this planet together. And that's like saying, oh, this is our home. Let's see if we can bring all of us together into one home, and then let's just fight and argue and destroy the home. Let's foul our own nest.
Yeah.
Let's blow up the place that we live on. This is our home. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
Was there some universal principle that said, here, you're going to be evolved, or you're going to be created, or you're going to be whatever your dictum is that you believe in, that you're all living there on that planet, and it makes sense to fight and war and destroy the planet.
Yeah.
Well, in either case, I don't care what your belief system is. That's just stupidity.
Yeah. Well, and kind of here's the point that I'm making with it, though, is these are people that are sitting here saying, hey, we need to protect and preserve our heritage, our culture, our society. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to have that happen. They don't want to see it destroyed. It's, honestly, I view it as the ultimate form of tribalism. Until they come out of the system,
they don't have a heritage, they don't have a society, they don't have anything. And they actually have no opinion about it, because until you come out from under that king, I don't care what your opinion is. If I need your opinion, I'll ask your king.
Exactly.
That's just the way it is. The president, the king, the queen, the pope, whatever. That's the hierarchy. Pope, queen, president.
King, yeah.
And the three city-states, Rome, which is the Vatican, and the Holy See oversee the city of London, and the city of London oversees D.C., and one is the spirit, quote, this is how they lined it up, is the so-called spiritual head, the financial head, and then the military arm is the enforcement arm of all contracts. Mm-hmm. That's the way it is established. Mm-hmm. Now, if you think that somehow or another that you're part of D.C. and that you're part of that posterity and it belongs to you,
no.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, no, you're not part of any of that.
You're under that thing that they call the vicar, and that organization actually owns the land that DC sits on.
Yeah.
And the crown of Great Britain was laid before the Pope and turned over to the Pope and then rented back by the King in 1213 AD.
Yeah.
So, this is old. What do they tell you in the Matrix? Yeah.
Yeah.
The program is old, older than you know.
Yeah,
we count this from the time it started till now as being the 6th generation of the Matrix.
Well, you and I both know that history, all it does is repeats itself. And those that don't know it are doomed to repeat it.
Well, the thing that they keep repeating is they won't quit believing that they have to fight in war against each other and then whine, gripe, and complain about everything else.
Yeah. That's
the thing that keeps being repeated. It is a fault in human nature. I don't know why it exists, but it's a fault in human nature. Even now, I mean, I could be deemed as complaining about everybody else. Just in this conversation. But the fault is human nature. But it is the reason why I say I don't judge this. I'm not here to judge it. I'm here to do what I have to do.
Yeah.
And for me, back when I had done enough work and we'd been in the Supreme Court and sued the IRS and all that, I knew I had to have immunity or I was going to go to prison.
Yeah.
I knew I had to seek the way. And then when I found UN Resolution 2625, that was it. I knew the answer and there was nothing else I needed to do except now I knew the why. Now it's all about the how.
Yeah.
How do you get this accomplished? How do you get recognition from other nation states, how do you find those people of like mind?
Yeah.
Everything that has to, like the judge said, contract with your own and you will be okay. Russell went back to prison for 6 months. He called me after he got out and he says, well, I don't have anything against you for testifying against me. I said, why would you? You lied to me.
Yeah.
You lied to me in my own home.
Yeah.
And what was it about the judge telling you that contract with your own and you'll be okay? Something about the word okay you didn't like?
Yeah.
You went back to prison because I told you to leave them alone and you didn't leave them alone?
Yeah, you went right back in and sued him.
I told him when we did that case, I said, I will never join with you again unless you promise me you're going to leave them alone. Because what we were doing at the time, I said, well, all we need to do is figure out what we do from here once we file this tort claim. Because this gives us a reason to, quote, state to a candid world our reasons for breaking the political bans, right?
Yeah.
Just like they wrote in the Declaration of Independence of the USA. So you're breaking that political ban for a reason, for a good cause. Well, don't we have good cause?
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel responsible for 20 trillion in debt?
No.
Why would any society run itself 20 trillion in debt and stay in debt for 240 years as they have?
They wouldn't.
That's just crazy.
Yeah.
It's insanity.
Well, and
if you don't want to be under e pluribus unum, if you think that's insane, then why do you want to remain in it? The fact that you're calling it insane and yet remain in it makes you insane.
Well, and one of the biggest things is people think, we don't like the government that's in there now, but don't worry, the re-election's coming up and we can just vote new people in. And yet it's the same exact freaking result. You and I both know how it works.
It's been controlled at the top. The two parties, they're both controlled, and they have been controlled ever since the very beginning. It's an illusion. It's the greatest. It's the greatest show on earth. John Quincy Adams himself wrote. Patrick Henry wrote that the president had the powers of the king, and 50 years later, John Quincy Adams wrote in the Jubilee of the Constitution that the president has more than dictatorial powers. So if you want to be under a dictator or someone who has more than dictatorial powers, then stay in the U.S.
Yeah. Well,
otherwise, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's all right. No, it's all right. I was done.
I thought you were done.
I am.
Oh.
But
So honestly, this is did it stop?
No.
So self-determination is, if you watch the Matrix movie itself, and they put these messages in the movies all the time, the keymaker was the most important guy. He was the exile. The right of self-determination in the old law, because neo means new key, new door, okay? In the customary international law, for thousands of years, it was called the right of exile or the right of self-exile. If you didn't agree with it, you had a right to leave. Well, leave and do what? Well, you had to go somewhere else then.
Yeah.
That changed now. Since satellites are in the air, there's no more land. The land must be shared.
Yeah.
Should have already been shared. There's been no cause for people to be dividing up the way they've been dividing up. Being that as it may, it has happened, and so now with the right of self-determination versus the right of exile, this is about operating and running concurrent jurisdiction and people sharing the land. And we already know that there's a hierarchy over all territorial jurisdiction anyway, just like I said, Pope, Britain, U.S.
Yeah.
And the same thing is true, Pope, China, whatever. It doesn't, Pope, Britain, China, Pope, Britain, Australia.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was showing John showing a friend of mine. His name's John, but I was showing him the Jay Treaty in 1794, where it shows that the United States still had British troops here, all the posts that were Britain or whatever, and what they were doing is reconciling their differences so that all the British troops and everything would leave, and it's now finally all turned over back to the U.S. And it talked about also via directly the Governor General, His Britannic Majesty's Governor General in America. Well, Australia today still has the Queen, the Governor General, and the Prime Minister. So even in 1794, they never had their freedom.
Yeah.
The President had a Governor General over him.
Well,
so the hierarchy is there. And people say, well, why don't they do something about it? I'm like, if you were president, all the benefit. I mean, look at Clinton is now a billionaire, multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
Okay. his attitude was, can't beat them, join them. So what?
Well,
And all they're doing is sitting there sucking out from the ignorant masses. You and I both know you can't. I don't think you can read a better document than Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars.
no, there's no better document, in my opinion, that's ever been written.
Well, in terms of describing the program as it is.
Yeah.
You know,
I think,
what we call the SOP, Standard Operating Procedure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny too, because the fact I sit there and see how much people complain about the political system and how things are going to change now that Trump's in office. And it's, for the vast majority, most people have gone back to sleep, so to speak, because they finally think, this person's in office, they're going to change everything. They're not seeing the fact, to use a ship analogy, the Titanic's still going to hit that fucking iceberg at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's still going to happen.
Oh, it's axiomatic. That
it's just a matter of how it's done.
Every single election runs on the platform of change. Every single election. And I've told people forever, they change it. It gets worse every 4 years.
Yeah, take a look at Obama's...
That's the change. It gets worse every 4 years. Obama, he took the debt from $8 trillion to $20 trillion. The debt is now 2.5 times bigger than it was.
Well, and take a look at what Obama's campaign slogan was the entire time he was running on both terms. Was what? Hope and change.
It doesn't matter which one of them is. It's always about change, and the change is always in a direction that serves another set of people, their posterity, and it does not serve the citizenry because it's not intended to serve the citizenry.
No, it's not for the citizens.
Citizen, subject, and national, as it states in compacts and books written about compacts between states or compacts of a state, citizen, subject, and national are all synonyms in international law. I was showing John last night the treaties that were written in the 1700s that talked about the United States and its subjects, or subjects of the United States. You can go look at the Algiers Treaty, the Tunis Treaty, any of these treaties where the words subject, citizen, or national are just interchangeable. And it literally says, and John's like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed. Subjects of the United States. I said, yeah, who were those subjects? Well, in other ones it says citizens, in other ones it says subjects, in other ones it says nationals. Usually when they have a bey or a king or whatever it is that these Moroccans had or anybody else, they always call any jurisdiction that had a person that was literally called king. They were always designated as subjects.
Yeah.
In the United States, they've just hidden it better because the words became interchangeable. And of course, the word president itself, I mean, if you have someone like Patrick Henry, who was a lawyer, they wanted him to sign the Constitution. He wouldn't. He was just upset.
Yeah.
Because his words were, have they said we the states or we the people? Where do they get the right to say we the people? Meaning the uppercase people, the 39 men that signed it. And it's the reason that Patrick Henry wouldn't do it, because they knew that they were creating a more powerful central government, and he was railing against it because he said, once you get this done, your president will have the powers of a king. Well, if he's got the powers of a king, he's a king. So why are you not calling him king?
Exactly.
Oh, I know. It just sounds better if you don't call him king and you call him president.
Yeah.
Big whoop. This is like saying that a republic means anything. It doesn't matter what a republic says or what the word republic means. It only matters what the contract is.
Yeah.
Like People's Republic of China or the United Soviet Socialist Republic or whatever. And technically, if you want to get...
Or the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Also known as North Korea.
Or the Republic of Nigeria, or the Republic of whatever. It's everywhere out. The Republic of France now. France has reformed its government and written 5 constitutions in the last 160 years. They reformed that government so many times it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Who cares? What does that mean to the citizenry? Did they pick up any rights yet?
No. It doesn't mean a damn thing to them.
No. It only means that the power structure at the top changed the way they're going to operate.
Yep. It's just the same as, like, say, working with Pepsi. Yeah, the executives at the top of Pepsi just decided, hey, we don't like how this is being done, we're going to change it. And the workers are just...
They're employees.
There to deal with it.
They're employees.
Yeah,
they have no say-so.
The same exact as citizens. It's... These are the orders, these are the things we're going to change.
Even the stockholders have no say-so, typically because what they will do in these board elections and board meetings or whatever about changing any direction of the company, they send out a directive saying, here's what we're looking at doing. Do you want to attend a meeting, or are you willing to sign over your proxy?
Yep.
Well, guess what voting is?
Signing over your proxy.
That's signing over your proxy. Once you sign over your proxy to that board of directors, and then they make decisions, do they call you back and ask you for your permission?
Nope.
Do you now have any say-so in what they did?
Nope.
No, you gave them your proxy. You're done. That's it. You have no rights.
Yep. Well, and it's funny too, because people say, "Oh, well, we have a representative republic instead of a direct democracy," and it doesn't freaking matter what you call it. It's the same bullshit.
The best statement you can say about this one is what was put in the movie The Patriot, and when Mel Gibson said, "So what am I going to do now?" I want to opt for this system that has a tyrant 3,000 miles away and trade it for a system that has 3,000 tyrants a mile away.
Yeah, and take a look at any.
And the tyrannical part of it is that they think it's just Washington D.C. It's every governor, every state office, every
city,
every county, every city, whatever. You can be arrested by the municipality, you can be arrested by the county, you can be arrested by the state, you can be arrested by the feds. And if you violate international law, they'll arrest you for that too.
Yep.
So it doesn't make any difference. Citizens have no rights.
No.
Zero.
No. And
complaining about it doesn't get you any rights.
Well, and it's funny too, because with the stuff I've been doing with Freeport, especially, the past year or so, it's the guy that I have in mind for my Minister of Foreign Affairs, and I've talked to him about this. Admittedly, he's 18 years old. 18. But here's the reason why I really want to get him on board and get him in this position, is because of the fact he's a game addict. But the games that he plays are all real-time strategy games. So he knows how foreign policy works and how, if you make this decision, it's going to affect this. And if you want,
age is irrelevant age is irrelevant. This is all about knowledge.
Yeah.
I learned long ago that there's this thing where people say in the South, older and wiser.
No.
When I was growing up, I used to look at my family and go, well, I don't know how you figure any of you people are getting older and wiser, because if you got older and wiser, wouldn't you get happier?
Yeah.
I mean, wise means you would learn how to live a happy life. And people aren't. I mean, I'm talking generally about, because I look at what I've done and what I've accomplished. I'm not unhappy with my life at all.
Yeah.
I'm disappointed in some of the way the decisions have gone, but a lot of those decisions weren't directly, some of the things that should have occurred that I say should have occurred, maybe they shouldn't have. But some of the, quote, pitfalls along the way have been due to people not doing what they should have been doing. They said they wanted this, they ended up not wanting this because their actions proved that they didn't want it.
Yeah.
And that's in terms of self-determination itself, just that one alone. And not counting businesses and people saying, stealing or lying to get your money or doing those kind of things. I mean, this planet is the planet is replete with nefarious people.
Yeah.
And so to insulate yourself from them, I mean, you need to have immunity.
Yeah.
And even then, you got to be very, very prudent and judicious about what you do.
Well,
but my point about the 18-year-old is this: knowledge is key. My biggest example of that is John Quincy Adams being trained by Abigail and John Adams to be minister, plenipotentiary, and ambassador to Russia and the courts of Versailles at age 14. Age 14. There were men at age 14 who left England to come to the United States to start businesses. And everybody used to tell me, I was like, well, they grow up faster. You've heard that one before? I used to hear that all the time 20 years ago when I had my...
They grow up so fast.
Yeah, right. No, you know what that means? All it means is, they're exposed to more garbage and crap.
Yeah.
That is supposed to be adult, with the word adult being short for the word adulterer.
Yeah.
This is how they play the word game. They don't grow up quickly. They don't, because growing up means accepting responsibility. And that's what the law of nations is all about, is you taking personal responsibility. The right of self-determination is about you taking total responsibility. And if you're not willing to take total responsibility, then you have no right to complain when things go bad because you weren't responsible.
Well,
You abdicated your responsibility, gave it over to someone else, and then you want to sit there and complain when they turn against you and make changes that aren't in your best interest?
well, and see, that's exactly why I've decided to make the age of consent for Freeport the age of 16. Because, yeah, I'm sure there's a couple bad things that can happen with that. But overall, if you give somebody the age of consent at 16 to sign contracts and do things on their own, they're going to be exposed to more crap at a sooner age, which means hopefully they'll be able to deal with it much sooner than those that have to wait till later in life to be exposed to that same thing. Because, and it's all about how they're taught, how they're brought up. How are you going to deal with this situation at this age, instead of saying, oh, you can't even look at this until you're this age? No, it's you need to be shown how to do things, have a mentor, and then, heaven forbid, go and do them yourself. You know, it's the best way.
It's axiomatic that the younger generation has to learn because their parents have not taught them, no more so than my parents taught me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and of course, I'm above 50 years old, so my parents didn't teach me, and I didn't start learning any of this until I was around 38. And so, you know, how many times that I look now at what I know, and I would like to be like John Quincy Adams and know what I know now at age 14, 16, 18, 20 years old.
Yeah.
Because my life would have been completely different.
Oh, yeah.
Completely by this time.
I'm sure all of us would have completely different lives if we were taught or shown the truth.
As I told when I was on Sarah's interview Friday 2 weeks ago, one of the last statements I made in that interview was, people think this is strange, but the reality is that if you had grown up in Buckingham Palace, everything I'm saying there would be nothing that I'm saying that would be foreign to you.
No.
At all.
It would all be
Zero.
common sense.
No, it would be common knowledge because
Well,
you'd have been
yeah.
trained from a very young age that international law is the supreme law.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know that they would train them about the right of self-determination because they don't have to exercise it. They're already in control.
Yeah, exactly.
They're now taught how you're going to maintain that control.
Well, and you have so many different people that expect other people to do things for them. And it's, how in the world can you call your... And again, this may be a bit harsh, but hey, it's exactly how I feel. How the fuck can you call yourself an adult if you can't even perform a simple act for yourself? If you're waiting for somebody else to do it. And the right of self-determination...
What can you say to that other than you get what you pay for?
Exactly. But here's kind of the point that I'm making, though. The right of self-determination is a relatively simple process. That doesn't mean it's easy, not by a long shot, but it is in itself a very simple process.
I think all universal principles and concepts are easy. It doesn't mean that living here is easy. It doesn't mean that implementing these things is easy. That's the whole point. Simple doesn't mean... Simple is simple. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
And it's like looking at the United States Code and having to learn all 90 million laws that have been passed or whatever.
It would be impossible.
That's not even simple. That's not easy. There's nothing to that even...
I don't even think that would be possible.
But it goes back to that personal responsibility. And this has always been a problem with human nature is, you know what I'm reminded of? I'm reminded of the old cartoons. And anybody listening to this is probably under the age of 40, probably won't remember this. But I remember the cartoons. They had this guy like Droopy Dog. Remember the whole Droopy Dog cartoon? Whatever that guy was, Droopy. And there was one time when there was like all these soldiers that were all Droopy Dogs or whatever, and the commander's up there, and he's some kind of big dog wolf guy. I don't remember, but it's a cartoon, right?
Yeah.
And so they're doing this, and they're putting out this order and directive, and they need volunteers. So can I have a volunteer? And all of a sudden, every single one of them, except for one, they all lift their leg as if they're going to step forward, and then all of them take one step back and leave one out there hanging by himself.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what the human population reminds me of. They want to. It's like, oh, we need a volunteer. Oh, what? I'm taking a step back, and whoever's left hanging out there, that's your volunteer.
Well, it's all about the greed and the me attitude. And it's, you know, like we've talked about before, both you and I have had people come to us and that'll willingly join on to our respective nations once everything else is built, once everything is in place, where they could just walk in and do nothing really. And it's neither one of us want that. It's no, we want people that are going to build the society.
It's not that neither one of us want it. As soon as you got it all built, what do you need them for anymore?
Exactly.
I mean, if you're not willing to help build and you're just sitting around waiting for a free ride, okay, I'll tell you what. You sit over there, this is what I tell my people. You sit over there, you want to wait until I got this bill. When they call, when they kind of have that, I've just never have them have that attitude with me because I'm too blunt. I'm too bottom line.
Yeah.
If you're not willing to pledge to build something new, then you, by universal principles, because of your unwillingness to take responsibility, all right, well, the university said, well, then we'll put all the taxation responsibility on you and let the other ones that are taking responsibility have immunity from your failure to take responsibility. So your unwillingness to pledge means that, okay, fine, you get to get taxed.
Yeah.
And since you don't care about who makes the decision about taxing you, if they take all your money away from you, so what?
Yep.
You haven't chosen to do anything.
Yeah.
So join with me after I get it all built. What would I need you for?
Nothing.
If I'm done, I'm done. What do you? And so I tell them, it's like, okay. I mean, I just laugh about it. I go, I tell you what you do. When I get it all, I said, you wait by the phone, and when I get it all built, I'll call you.
Yeah, sometime next century.
You just stay right there at the phone. I'll call you. Yeah.
Make sure you keep your phone on now.
So the point, and why would I do that? People say, well, you just mean you tell them all. I'm like, well, if they're lying to themselves, why shouldn't I go ahead and lie to them?
Yeah.
But they're going to sit there and have that attitude with me?
Well, and the huge thing with Freeport is it is not going to be another welfare state. We're just
Can't
simply
build
not.
another welfare state. This is the whole thing about becoming financially independent in the end of this anyway. Now, I understand financial independence does not, in the United States, it has to be based on money because there is nothing else here.
Yeah.
You don't get to go squat on land and just go build your sustainable agricultural communities or whatever. These are we've already put together these projects to do sustainability and sustainable agricultural projects, like the one we presented to Nigeria. That's a $600 million project. But we have the technology now to build sustainability, to build communities, to build them from scratch. Ghana is one of the nations that one of my friends down in Atlanta, he's former DOD, he helped me actually he did most of the work. I put together the people that can do the solar and biomass and different things. And they were looking at, like in Anson County, North Carolina here, Gary Bailey, a friend of mine, he's probably among the top 3 solar guys in the U.S. He built Solar One in Henderson, Nevada, which powers 90,000 houses in Vegas. It's been there 20 years. And solar right now has become very, very cheap. So it's actually cheaper now than biomass, and it's cheaper. PV as now, which is photovoltaic, has become a lot cheaper than what solar thermal is. And solar thermal has always been the cheapest way to go, where they have the concave tubing, and they have all the reflective mirrors in there, which heats water inside piping, and then you got steam, and then you turn turbines, then you create electricity. But going back to financial independence, you can either do it through what the world calls money, which now considers a resource. A resource is in the eye of the beholder. For me, money, I just call them resources because I don't care if it's debt-based anymore as long as the liability for using it doesn't stick to me. My pledge is to my state, not to theirs, any more so than a Japanese citizen coming here has to pay U.S. taxes, or any more so than a U.S. citizen who goes and works and lives for 10 months out of the year in Japan has to pay Japanese taxes. You owe allegiance to the state that you belong to. So the point is, financial independence could easily be farmers. If you can take care of everything you need, water, food, shelter, clothing, power, all that kind of stuff, if you can take care of it by living off the land, then you're financially independent. But if you don't gain that,
you'll never have it.
then you're going to end up at age 60, 65, whatever it is, 70, you're going to have no choice to go back into a welfare state. So why build a welfare state?
Exactly.
And I'm not here to build welfare state. I mean, welfare states are based on not taking responsibility.
Yeah. And that's a big thing is we're insistent that people that come on board with Freeport become financially independent if they're not already. And like for me as the king, I want to see step A, B, C, and D laid out. Mm-hmm. And I want to see in a month step A's met. In 2 months, step B. And so on down the road. So in a year's time, I want to see you financially independent. And if you're not, we need to have a serious conversation.
Well, I don't have those kind of stipulations that I would say, okay, within this period of time, I already have some people on board that are financially independent, and I already have some, like I told you, Randall with his business right now. I mean, he's turning $50,000-$60,000 a month, and he's doing really well. Mm-hmm. Is he financially independent? No. Can he get there? Yeah. How long is it going to take? I have no clue. I mean, that's up to circumstances. There's some kind of, you never know when some piece of equipment or something's going to break down, or recently his wife had to go to the hospital, whatever, for some visit, and insurance will only cover so much, and now they got a $13,000 bill or $18,000 bill or whatever it is.
Well, and that's
we never know about those things, and there's always the possibility of ups and downs in any economy, in any business, especially based on the fact that they're doing the whole debt-based monetary inflation thing.
Yeah. Don't even get me started on that subject.
Yeah. So, but in the end of the day, the technology is there to build the sustainability, and it's there for people to become financially independent by living off the land again and having the resources. And here's the thing about the elite. They're already doing that. They're actually using money to buy up water rights and all that kind of stuff in other countries.
Yeah.
So that they will end up having those rights, and they'll deprive those citizenry of it and they'll look at it going, well, if we can bribe your politicians to turn over all your water rights, you're just a citizen. Why would we care about you?
Exactly.
And there again, it goes, and I don't like, there's a harshness to it that I don't like, but there's a reality to it that I have to accept. That is a reality.
Yeah. Well, no matter how you slice it, reality is reality. And it's love it or hate it, it is just what it is. And it's, when I talk about, I want to see people financially independent in a certain period of time, I understand there's life circumstances that you can't control, things like that. But I want to see at least a commitment to have that happen. That doesn't mean like in a year's time you need to be making $200,000 a year. But I want to see some kind of steps being made where you're working towards that.
Well, all we're talking about is what's necessary.
Yeah.
And necessary means exactly that. It's necessary.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be able to. You have to be willing to do what's necessary.
Yeah. Because if you're not,
if you're just wanting to sit around and watch American Idol and draw welfare, and that's all your necessity requires, then sit there and do it.
Well,
but why bother complaining about anything at that point in time? But if you want to exercise self-determination, see new things built on the planet, get involved, being able to, as I said for years on my website, there's two types of people on the planet. Those that are exercising stewardship with immunity, and those doing busyness with no immunity.
Yeah.
And so if you got no immunity, you got no immunity. You're at the whim of whatever system you're involved in. If they decide they want to put you in prison, the case law in the United States is such that it says, I think it's in Embler versus Pogman or Shanklin versus Jones, I don't remember which, but it says right in there, it could be Myers versus Morris, could be Gruzmeyer, I can't remember. Anyway, the point is that case law here is already established that prosecutors can charge an innocent person. Let me back up on that. Prosecutors can knowingly charge an innocent person for a crime that never occurred.
Yeah.
Well, you got no rights where they can knowingly charge you. You're just at the luck of the draw.
Well, that's like you and I were talking earlier about stuff I used to do when I was with the Oregon State Police about, convincing people to work with us. Mm-hmm. I can go, this is one of the things I used to do. I had somebody detained sitting in my interview room that I knew he had really good connects. and yet he wasn't talking. So I could go in with fake evidence, in this case a blank videotape, and make him think that he's on video committing a crime. And I can manipulate and twist that any way I want. And guess what? There's no repercussions for it.
It's worse than that, and you and I both know it. I've talked to guys over the years who call me, and one guy was in prison for months and months and months. He was in a cell with 10 guys. He was a diabetic. They wouldn't give him his meds.
Yeah, because
they
in fact,
freeze him down at night, sleeping on a concrete floor with one little blanket.
Yeah, because in fact they were.
And he was in there, literally. He was in there with a guy who was the founder of Mailboxes, etc., which was then bought out and became UPS stores.
Mm-hmm.
But after that guy got those millions for selling out mailboxes or whatever, he tried to do another deal. And for some reason they wanted him, and they just put him in prison. He sat there for 3.5 years with no trial.
Yeah.
3.5 years, would not let the man bail himself out. And they basically destroyed him.
Yeah. Well,
so they don't, it's just axiomatic. I mean, here in the U.S., they have the largest prison population in the world, especially by percentage of population.
Yep.
And that percentage is getting bigger. And all the prisons have been privatized. Go look at any financial statement, quarterly financial statement that's put out by Wackenhut. They're making somewhere around probably $500 million to $1 billion a year operating private prisons because they're now being farmed out by the government to do it privately.
Yeah, because 90% of the prisons and even the city and the county jails in this country are privately owned.
Yeah. So
they're not owned by the government. They're privately owned.
You become a number that is nothing more than an asset on a ledger sheet.
Yep.
And the cheaper food they can give to you, the cheaper the beds they can give to you, the cheaper anything. It doesn't matter.
David, that's the thing. You want to know from the industry standard how much it costs to keep somebody locked up in prison per day?
I would rather know how much they make per day.
Oh, I can get into that too, but do you know what it costs per inmate per day?
No.
It includes their meals, their shoes, everything.
$2?
$1.50.
Yeah.
The amount that they make versus what they spend spend $1.50 to keep you locked up per inmate per day. The amount they make is more like $200 per inmate per day.
Here's the problem that you and I talked about earlier. And this is where I got out of all the men that I ever talked to that called me that were in that condition. And honestly, if I hadn't done what I did, I would have been in that condition. If I hadn't won my honor among the federal courts and among the judges, and basically, when I wrote them my Declaration of Peace and Reconciliation as ambassador for the Dom, they literally, someone went and cut off all the switches at the IRS. I never heard from them again. And I was hearing from the IRS. I was getting letters. And that all ended because my status changed. And someone went and literally changed it in their system for me. I didn't have to do it. I had to do nothing. All I had to do was stand and stand my ground. That's how you get standing. I mean, how is that rocket science? Well, I don't know how to get standing. Oh, you have to stand.
You stand your ground. You stand up for what you believe in.
You have to stand.
Yeah.
And as Arthur and I used to talk about when I was going through a lot of this, and we were training, and I was learning international law, and it doesn't matter. It's like an agent I had show up one time, and he said, "Why did you want to take on this 8,000-pound gorilla?" And I said, "I really didn't. I'm just trying to find the door out."
Yeah.
The point is it doesn't matter if you're standing in front of the 8-pound gorilla with your knees shaking and knocking, and that fear level hits you or whatever. It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
You still have to stand.
Yeah.
If they can,
you still have to stand and go to that door.
If they can make you acquiesce, there's an old maxim among the kings of the earth. And this is why whining doesn't work. It's why complaining doesn't work. There's an old maxim that says power takes as ingratitude the wreathing of its victims. That means when you're in the lion's mouth, don't wiggle.
Exactly. Exactly.
It makes the lion mad.
Well, and that's the other thing too. To use another analogy, when you got the shark's mouth wide open and you're looking in there, don't bleed. Why? Because what are sharks attracted to?
Yeah.
The scent of blood. And you're screwed.
So, anyway, these are all just principles. It's all a principle. It's easy and simple to understand. Implementing means you have to do it. You have to stand. You have to understand take care of your health, eat right, take good nutrition. You're not going to get it out of the food these days, I don't think.
Yeah, because without...
Become financially independent, and then the only way to protect your financial independence and your health ultimately is exercise self-determination. I call it the MAP. Number one, maintain good health. Number two, acquire financial independence. Number three, protect and secure 1 and 2 with self-determination and self-governance. Otherwise, I mean, how many people do they take it away at the end of their life? They'll let them go all the way through their life, have all these assets, learn all this stuff. I mean, earn all these things, and allegedly acquire assets, and only to have them taken away from them before they die. And the system now is made to do that just through the medical system. I mean, they'll take it all away from you.
For your final expenses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I was dealing with somebody that it was just with my mother, and they were talking about an estate case up in New York, and how the person actually in their will appointed these attorneys to run the will. I said, you do know attorneys call drafting up wills for people estate planning, right?
Yeah, because they're planning their estate.
They're planning, the attorney's planning their estate.
Well, and see, that's exactly why my grandma and grandpa, before they got divorced, they took all their property, everything they were going to divide up upon their death. And they did it before they got divorced. They said, okay, you're supposed to get these things, here you go. You're supposed to get these things, here you go. That way there's no fighting, there's no bickering or anything else after they die. One of them has already died. And one of the things they did I thought was hysterical, but it pissed a lot of people in the family off, is they took everything that one uncle wanted and gave it to his brother, and they took everything that he wanted and gave it to the first one. Why? Because those two uncles could not get along, and they still can't. So I think they honestly did that just for their own amusement, because they knew this fight and the riffraff that it would cause.
The elite don't allow that among themselves.
No, they don't.
This is the thing about training your children and training them the way they should go and doing the things that they should do. None of their estates go through probate. Everything is owned in a business, and they already have a hierarchical structure where when they die, all they're doing is passing on the reins of the business. It's not, what was it Rockefeller said? Own nothing, control everything. So there's nothing that passes through any of those probates or any of those channels, because they're not going to have their stuff compromised in that way.
Well, and it's the same thing that anybody trying to go down this path, they need to have that exact same mindset.
Well, the other thing to really understand about the path, this is the reality. This is the reality of what the founders understood. Self-determination and self-governance, forming that new compact is the ultimate asset protection program, because your properties and your person, everything becomes inviolable.
Exactly.
And that doesn't happen with corporate law, trust law, or any of that kind of stuff. It only happens within a compact. It only happens by forming something new and assuming you're separate and equal stations so that you are separate.
Yep.
And that's the reality of what happened. I give them credit for, as it says in the write-up that James Brown Scott did in 1916 on the rights and duties of states, that the United States of America and what they did became the model for all the rest of the breakaway colonies. Now, when I was going through and learning, before I found his documentation, I always called it the standard. Never had a nation state formed by a declaratory act. Never had that happen.
Yeah.
Usually it was just people moving away from a tyrant and doing their best to get away from that and forming up something new. And then usually they adopted a king who then became another tyrant.
Yep. Well, and that's something.
So you have to be you have to be judicious and cautious in this, and understand that regardless of what kind of decision you make, there's always a possibility of that you may, this whole reformation of governments can occur as well within any compact. So the right of self-determination is always there for people, and it's the reason it's going to be honored. It was always there for other countries, the right of exile, or for other people to extricate themselves and get out from under tyranny, get out from under excessive taxation, whatever it was their grievance, they had a right to do this.
Well, and even if you read
many of those people never did it the right way, because there was an email that I was showing you today where this guy was talking about secession.
Mm-hmm.
Secession and picking up arms never works.
No.
Because without the knowledge to self-govern, you just end up back under the same people.
Well, yeah, and it's, you got all these people talking about, oh, we need to take this country back. Well, number one, it was never your country in the first place. You're just property of it. And number two, what the hell are you going to take back? It's that whole thing of...
To take it back means you possessed it in the first place and you didn't.
Yeah, well, and it's like, have these people never really read the Constitution? I mean, I know it doesn't apply to them or anything else, but even if you read, I think it's either the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, it states right in there, in the event the government becomes corrupt or perverted, it is the right and the duty to abolish it and form anew. There's your answer right there. They spelled it out crystal clear.
And they spelled it out of the law of nations.
Yeah.
That's their fault.
But
all right. What I want to do is I want to call Dewey. I told him I would call him on the way here. If you want to record this, because I need to ask him some questions. You can record this. I mean, if this is for them, this is how we've established recognition. Yeah. This is what we do.
Yeah, let's go ahead and record it, because this is for people of Freeport. This is not for public.
I've already mentioned. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is not for public consumption or distribution or anything else. This is a private.
I tell you what, can you pause that just for a second?
Okay, it's recording.
Dr. Dewey Painter, mobile.
I know who you are, so go ahead.
I got tied up. Sorry, I was going to call you. I know 30 minutes ago.
Because I just got off 2 long phone calls. I didn't reach on hold, so.
Anything good?
Oh yeah, it's all good. The guy in Canada is trying to help us do a crowdfunding. We're trying to get things set up. Okay, so what you got?
Well, I wanted to revisit the conversation because I wasn't in a place to pay a whole lot of attention to you when you left Tampa the other day, and I told you I'd call you back that night.
You ignore me all the time, I know that.
Yeah, so, all right, so you met with the group down there. You said they have 5 warehouses full of aid ready to go to Puerto Rico?
I've got 2.5 million pounds of stuff backed up. I've got, and you divide that by 40,000, you can tell how many containers it would take to send it. I've got 2 containers here, loads here in Jacksonville in my warehouse, and one in another warehouse that's 28 pallets of water. I could probably double that if I had the funds. I've got 2 containers in Houston, Texas. One to go to Dominique and one to go, let's see, I got 1 load here to go to Dominique. I got 2 there to go to, one's going to go to Dominique and, actually both of them are going to go to Puerto Rico. And then I'm trying to get 4 loads out of Virginia to go to, Houston, and he put in semi-trailers and take it to Mexico for the earthquake relief. Other than that, I haven't done much.
What about, was one of these designated for the Virgin Islands?
Oh yeah, well we're waiting for a response back. I've got a 20-footer load in Winter Haven, and if I can get into the Virgin Islands, I would send that 20-foot load.
Now you met with the group down there in Tampa to discuss with them the logistics, because weren't you telling me that what is their problem? They don't have boots on the ground in Puerto Rico, or what is their problem?
No, they got boots on the ground now. They just went down there and got things set up, and they got permission with the President Trump's disaster advisor. When the containers come in, he's going to go to port and tell them to release them immediately. And then they got spots all around country villages to send the loads to, so they get distributed out fairly.
What is the situation as far as their needs? I mean, I know we're already, you told me 2 point, I already did the math on it. We're looking at 60 containers that you're saying that this group has.
Now, they are flying some of them down. But they want I suggest you need to back off the heavy stuff and put it on containers and let the people that are funding the planes fly that down. And there's some groups that are funding doing that. But they're not funding anything to go by surface.
Now you're saying are they going to be, there's people are funding the shipping cost?
For the airplanes.
Okay.
Not for the containers. In other words, they're buying fuel for the airplanes, and I think airplanes are being donated homes and expensive. Pilots and planes are being donated. The fuel is being covered.
Well, on an airplane, it's just going on a pallet, right?
Yeah, they're cargo planes, they're palletize.
Right. But the others will be going on to 40-foot containers that'll ship.
Yeah, they're going 40-foot containers, and some of them will be pallet loaded, some of them will be hand loaded.
What are your connections in Dominica as far as us getting recognition out of that? If I help raise some funds for this.
Well, we're dealing with the representative for Dominique in Miami that is getting everything cleared for the containers to go in through the government now. She's their liaison, and I'm sure we can ask Donna to. If we get some support for that, we want a letter acknowledging your support for that.
Are you saying Dominique or Dominica?
Dominica.
And this, where did you say he was at in Florida?
I'm sending it to Miami, and then Tropical Container Company is taking containers over.
Is when you say he's a representative, is he a consular agent, or what? Does he have a political?
She's an agent for the. She handles all the cargo that's going into Dominica. She handles it for their government. And she's the liaison between these people shipping and the government now.
Okay. All right. Next question is, you met with Bob LaFranc, and you told me that you need me to draft that letter of invitation to give to them, put on their letterhead, so they can invite you down as representative for Dom and get the passports and all that stamped, right?
Right. I would suggest that the letter say that I have dual citizenship, American and Dom, and that I would be traveling on both passports. I don't know if that needs to be in there or not. Bob's telling me that, so probably not need.
Well, my letter would just be that you're representing our interest in a capacity as a ministerial agent for education and humanitarian aid, or just for education.
I think one of my passports says Minister of Education.
Well, yeah, I think I need to limit that to education. Okay, and when you talked to Bob, I mean, what did you talk to him? I know we mentioned the hospital, or he had mentioned the hospital in the past. Did you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I need to go by and look at it. Hold on.
Is that the hospital in Haiti?
Yeah, it's in the northern part.
I've got a passport that says Minister of Humanitarian Aid.
I'm sure I have another one. I'm sure I have another one for you somewhere.
Yeah, you got my other one. I gave it to you, which says thing Minister of Education.
Yeah, that's the. It's well, it's either with me right now, or it's in this storage when I packed up the office down there before the hurricane hit.
This expires in 2033, something like that.
Yeah. Okay, I have going back to the hospital. What you said? I know you said you got to go by and look at it, but the situation is that they're wanting that to be outfitted. I mean, you're saying it's already outfitted, but they want it to be staffed and taken over, right?
Yeah, and Pastor Bob has medical people that are willing to network into that system and run the hospital. And what we want to do is make it an educational hospital, so we bring in students from our librarian school, because I've got another school that said, hey, can we send our students also? So that could be a 4th year internship for those that are being trained to be RNs or medical service people.
Is there anything else you're looking at talking to them about as far as you're planning a trip to Haiti?
Yeah, I would say we want to discuss establishing a diplomatic office.
All right, you already have land there. Are you looking at that as a possible location for it, or are you thinking something needs to be done in Port-au-Prince?
Well, probably closer to Port-au-Prince, but I wouldn't worry about that right now. Where it's going to be located could be. I wouldn't put that in the letter. I wouldn't.
No. I'm just asking you in general.
Yeah. After I told her then, I'm going to suggest to them that since I already have a hand in quite a bouquet, that we would consider using that to build a compound that would be humanitarian education and diplomatic services.
Right.
And if they say, well, we like that idea, fine. If not, they say, well, we feel like you should be closer in the Port-au-Prince. Let them suggest that.
Yeah, I would make. I'm not gonna. I mean, I would make the letter generic. Obviously, I mean, the broader the better.
I wouldn't even discuss that. I would just say the possibility of establishing a diplomatic office. Sure.
Okay, well, I will be back down there this week. Based on I've already talked to him about taking the Washburn property, so that's going to happen.
That's going to happen?
Yep.
Okay, now, Pastor Bob is in Haiti for the rest of this week. We already get that letter to him. All we got to do is send the letter you're writing is a letter suggesting that they write to us.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, I know. I understand that. Yeah. I mean,
I send that to him by email, and then he can have it done on their letterhead and bring it back with him.
X is to Y, and A is to tabulate.
Yeah, it really needs to come from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, if possible.
That's fine. That's fine. Just draft it from the Minister of Foreign Affairs to. I would address it to Dom as a governor and say we're requesting that your Minister of Education or humanitarian, whichever you want to put, visit us to et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
Draft it up, we can tweak it a little bit, we can let Bob tweak it a little bit, and then when everybody's in agreement, he can take it over and get the Minister of Foreign Affairs to send it, or to draft it up, give it to him, and then he can copy it, and scan it and send it to us, or bring it back with him. I think we need to move pretty quickly.
Okay. Okay.
And I will plan to go down there the first week in November.
Is there anything else that, other than the aid that you're talking about here with Puerto Rico, Mexico, Dominica, and the negotiations and the talks we've had about the hospital and diplomatic office in Haiti, is there anything else that we need to talk about or look at in terms of, I don't know, Liberia or?
Well, Liberia ain't my lunch. I've put everything I can, and in fact, I'm trying to figure out how to pay the light bill this month. Because I had to send them more money, and they held up part of the freight and wouldn't let it go unless we get paid them more money. And I already told them we will not make another shipment until I have a very firm, sealed, documented agreement from the new government. So, right now we got to recover from this.
Well, what does Mike Supon have to say about all that, or Stephen Linde?
Well, they're extremely upset about it. There's nothing they can do about it. They reneged. They lied. Well, I can't say they lied. They just broke their promises. And the election's this month. So.
Okay.
They are unloading the container. In fact, it's probably all unloaded by now. I know Steve sent some pictures of his little boys on some scooter bikes that I sent them on the container, so I know they got it.
Okay.
Cute little pictures. If there's any funds y'all can help us with, that'd be appreciated.
I'm going to put that, I'm going to see what I can do, and I'm going to put it out to Randall and to Kula and John, and yeah, we'll see what we can do. I mean, I have to obviously have funds for, you know, the move into that property, but I don't know.
That's going to be a priority right now.
Well, I will be talking to them about what we can do, and I think there's going to be something that we can do.
All right.
And now, is there anything else other than that?
No, that's the principal things.
Okay. Very good.
Now I do have some possibilities. Not to add confusion to the mess, but I've got a possibility of some diplomatic things in India, and we'll see how that goes. All right.
India, meaning based on education projects. Okay.
The director, president of the college there we've worked with since 2009 is here with me now. He's going to be here another week or two.
Oh, he's still there with you?
Well, there's a place he's staying at. He's not met with me.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, he's still in Jacksonville?
Right, he's still in Jacksonville. He's going to be staying in the area. Well, I may not stay in Jacksonville, but he's not going back until the last of November.
What about the gentleman I met with from Ghana?
He's already gone back to Ghana.
Okay.
And once he gets settled in, then I'll renegotiate with him for understand. I think what's going to happen is somewhere probably January that I'll be able to go to Liberia, Ghana, and Uganda and wrap up two things. And I'm hoping I can. If I go into Ghana first, I can probably get in there with my passport easier, and then I'll use my Dom passport and all the other places. Save my American passport until I get ready to leave. Okay?
Sounds good. Okay.
Right.
Thank you. Bye.
Speaking of that, here's kind of the thing I'm wondering with the credit card, with that whole business there. What does it take to get...
You mean the merchant services?
Yes, the merchant services. What does it take to get set up with that? And
I just have an agency agreement. I'll set it up any way you want to.
Okay.
You know, I mean, now all the videos and training for doing this is already online. I mean, Brian did most of it, but we also have Jeff Moskowitz, who wrote the program. You know, he does an overview of the whole industry. This is the reason why I said, like, I'm looking at setting up a model for this in Greenville, but I'm not going to be doing it for at least a month and a half I'm sure.
Well, the reason why I'm asking is because, in fact, one of the people that's on board with Freeport is going to be coming out here to North Carolina, but he's wondering if he can get started on it in North Dakota before he comes out here, and then just be able to continue on with it out here.
Yes, of course. It's not I mean, this is, you know, we're already making sales. I don't necessarily have to have that office in Greenville. I mean, we're already making sales in Greenville.
Yeah. So it's something he could do out of his home if he wanted.
Of course, anybody can do this out of their home. I mean, you know, the day, I mean, I ran my construction business out of a home office for years. My home improvement construction, and when I just converted everything to just a pure pressure cleaning business, and I had business all over eastern North Carolina, doing commercial, and then in Raleigh, where I was locally, I for years dominated that industry. I mean, because it was just a cash cow. It was a cash business. And I had been in real estate. I was better at advertising than any of my competition. I also had when I started focusing on just that one thing, I had better equipment, better machinery, better systems. And I developed formulas where when people called me, I never had to bid a job. I mean, I never had to go to their house to bid a job. So I was able to undercut everybody in the marketplace and still just rack it in, because I didn't waste my time. I became so efficient that I had no waste of time.
Yeah.
And other guys were like, I mean, I even had the owners is like, how can you do this just cheap? Nobody else is giving me this kind of price. I said, I just save 45 minutes to an hour, hour and a half driving back and forth to your house.
Yeah.
I said, you called me. I've done hundreds of homes like yours. So this is the whole thing about understanding systems. It's the reason I want to create a model. But as far as this business goes, everything is already done. It's turnkey. People just need to be trained, and how to fill out the paperwork is the biggest problem. It's the biggest part of it. It's not really a problem. It is a problem in a way, because I've had people say, look, go watch the videos, learn how to fill out the paperwork. And they still want me to train them on how to do the paperwork. I'm like, why am I going to waste my time? Print out 2 sets of paperwork and pretend you're doing it with the business down the street, some mom and pop, I don't really care. And as Brian goes along and tells you how to fill it out, fill it out. Once you do it 2 or 3 times, even if it's a mock-up, even if it's practice, you'll know what to do if you're sitting down with an actual business owner. And so the only thing that becomes necessary there is to make sure that you're following the checklist of what has to happen, which is getting their business license, getting their personal identification, their social security number, their EIN, and that, because this is all done through leasing and financing. It's been that way. And what we're doing in the industry is putting money back in their pocket. That's the reason I developed the motto, putting money back in your pocket from day one, because owners of businesses are tired of paying these fees on debit and credit cards. They don't have to pay it on checks. If you write someone a check, you're the one paying the fee on your account, right? Well, why would you not pay the fee on your debit and credit card accounts? It's your name on the card. So the banks basically have been taking anywhere from 6 to 8% of all the businesses and more, depending on what it costs them to get product to market. Like, if you're in an industry that's grocery store or convenience store where you got high cost of wholesale, getting products on the shelf, you got power, it's not the same. Your profit margins are a lot slimmer. So the amount of percentage that you're paying in merchant fees reflects a higher percentage of your profits than, say, alleged profit, let's just put it that way, than, say, someone who's doing a nail salon or a massage or chiropractic business where they don't have any cost or overhead other than their time. Now, be that as it may, even my chiropractor down in Jacksonville, Florida, when I first mentioned this to him, he said, man, I hate those Amex cards because they have the highest fees, and the reason they have fees is they're giving them cashback rewards and travel rewards off the back of the business owner.
And that needs to be off the back of the consumer.
Well, it needs to be off your own back.
Exactly, off the back of the consumer.
And so over in Australia, they implemented this system 6 years ago, and 80% of the business owners have already changed. So the same thing is going to happen here in the U.S., but right now it's a huge opportunity because the market is less than 2% saturated. And which means there's if you look at Australia being 80%, we're looking at 4 or 5 year run before you get to 80%.
Yeah.
And it's a huge financial opportunity, especially the way I've designed the model.
Well, and you've got it designed, with the email scripts and everything else already done, basically.
We're not doing any email. Email's a waste of time. Email marketing went right out the window a long time ago.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm saying it's relatively that simple, though.
Well, here's the deal. This business will always be a belly-to-belly business because when you're dealing with that business owner, that's their baby.
Yeah.
It puts bread on the table.
Yep.
And most of them will want to meet eyeball to eyeball to develop a rapport and a trust with the person that they're talking to and dealing with.
Yeah.
And
it's that face-to-face human interaction.
It doesn't mean the day you walk out the door you got to go hold their hand, because once they're off and running, they're off and running.
But yeah, anyway, it's what I was trying to get at though is the process itself is relatively simple from what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of, I don't quite want to say a foolproof system, but pretty close.
The system's fine. There's nothing wrong with the system. I mean, we have new machines, new software, and we're doing it on 4 or 5 year leases, depending on what the agent wants to do. Some of that is at the agent's discretion, some of it's not, and because I had to design a uniform system, but I'm now setting it up where each person I bring in becomes an independent business owner with me directly. On a different basis, because I was basically rooked into a partnership that I didn't want to be rooked into. And this is not for public consumption, by the way, at all. This conversation is not to be discussed. This part of it.
Okay, so because the fact we're doing this for Freeport, we don't need to do the introductions or anything again. The question I was getting last night, though, and people are just looking for confirmation, and that's when they are no longer a U.S. citizen and come on board with Freeport as a ambassador, as a government official, they can still have bank accounts and things like that here in the U.S. through the W8BEN.
Yes, that's all the in treaty language or in commercial uniform commercial code language, UCC language. It's either called modification of treaty or variation by agreement.
Yeah.
And they've already taken all this into account. Any foreigner, whether they're a dignitary or not a dignitary, as just as a foreigner, if they come here to the U.S. and let's say they're Australian, they're British, Chinese, Japanese, it doesn't matter. They don't owe allegiance to the United States government.
No.
But we all live on the planet together, so there are people in Canada that drive back and forth across the border every day to go to work in the U.S.
Yep.
Any
Same with
foreigner
U.S.
that
and
wants
Mexico.
a bank account here, if they are truly a foreigner, sets up what's called a W8BEN foreign exempt account. Exempt means the same thing as the word immune.
Yep.
So that's the exemption, and it already exists in the banking because it's been going on for decades now, where the whole banking system as it currently exists, I won't say that it happened before 1913 because
of Federal Reserve Act and stuff like that.
Yes, exactly. They didn't have the electronics, and it really comes down. The exemptions come down to the IRS being the collection arm for the Federal Reserve.
Yep.
And that's what that debt's based on.
Y'all doing okay?
Doing great.
Doing good.
See anything in life?
Anyway, we're back now. So, one of the things is, you can do everything you can, well, not everything, but a vast majority of everything that you can do just the same as if you were a citizen, only the paperwork and everything else is done because it's done differently. Because of the fact that you are no longer required to pay taxes and everything else to the U.S. You're exempt from all that. Because the U.S. taxes only apply to U.S. citizens and U.S. nationals.
Taxes just follow the taxes or pledges or whatever you want to call it. They only follow the jurisdiction that you're pledged to. That's it. Wherever you're saying your allegiance is, and if that allegiance means that it's allegiance to yourself because you're a sovereign member of a society, then there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, it's no different than looking at, let's say, Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin's a scientist. Okay, he's credited with flying a kite and with a key on it and discovering electricity or figuring out how to harness electricity in some degree or whatever it was. But no matter what anybody did as a signatory member, he set up his own state, and whatever scientific advances or that he personally did or whatever, he patented those in his state.
Yeah.
So that he had the international protections to go along with it. See, the thing about people think that you just owe allegiance, but you just owe them some money.
No.
You don't owe them money.
You owe them everything.
Everything you have. You owe them your intellectual property. You whatever. It's like working for Westinghouse or GE or General Dynamics in the military, whatever it is. If you're on payroll and you come up with some great patent and invention and you did it on,
it's their property, not yours.
Not yours.
Yeah, exactly. That's a big thing that happened, like with Sears, for example, the Craftsman. The guy that invented Craftsman worked for Sears. And so his design, his thing with the tools, the Craftsman line, automatically belonged to Sears. Because of the fact
they paid him to do it.
Yeah, because of the fact he worked for Sears. And even though it was his own invention, he worked for Sears, so it was their intellectual property.
This is the same thing when it comes to military. And this is why people have to start understanding that we weren't put on this planet to fight war and kill each other. That's not the purpose of being here. So being out from under that, when you step back and you look at it from a sovereign standpoint, see people say, I'll give you, for instance, I've had people say things to me like, well, I had an ancestor who he lost a leg in the Revolutionary War.
Too fucking bad.
I didn't ask him any of that. I don't even tell him. I just look up and go, did he get paid for his leg?
Yeah.
Because if he got paid to fight, then he's not a pledged member of the compact.
Yep.
If he'd have been a pledged member of the compact, he wouldn't have had to be paid.
Exactly. Because the fact he would have been paying with his life, his fortune, and sacred honor.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing that people don't understand, is when you're doing stuff like this, it takes committing everything you have to do it. Putting everything you have on the line.
Unless you just want to be a slave to the jurisdiction that you were born into.
Well,
that is the difference. People, you either become a pledged member to build something new on the planet where it's axiomatic that the maxims of commerce actually end up applying in this situation. And one of those maxims is he who sacrifices the most has the most credit or the most credibility. You want credibility? You make sacrifices. If you're not willing to sacrifice, then just hop back in line, go get your welfare checks, watch American Idol, and when they come to your door or they come to punk you or whatever it is, because of all your collusion with the war engine and any of that kind of stuff, or if you look at, say, the 9 cases of case law that I put out there, where it says that prosecutors are immune from prosecution for conspiring with judges to determine the outcome of judicial proceedings in advance, and prosecutors are immune from prosecution for knowingly charging an innocent person for a crime that never occurred. Well, if you want to just be one of them people that sits around pretending that, well, it'll never happen to me, yeah, I got plenty of those people I got stories about. One of them was a friend of mine that went to jail for 3 years because it never could happen to him.
Yeah. Well, and
he didn't do anything wrong.
And it's these people that think, oh, it'll never happen to me, it can never happen to me until it does. And then they're screaming about, oh, this was me and you're next. Where's my help? Where's my people to stand up for me? And there is none.
The system does not care.
No. And that's the biggest thing. People think
you made a comment yesterday about the average person committing 9 felonies a day. And this has been published by judges. It's been published in books. Some of them say 3 federal crimes a day. Some of them say more. It doesn't really matter. If you're part of the e pluribus unum sole person member of a society called the United States of America, which is dealing in 9-to-1 fraudulent debt-based Keynesian economics, you're already guilty of fraud every morning you wake up.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what, you're guilty of fraud. Your entire society is guilty of fraud.
Mm-hmm.
And they continually defraud other countries, and they continually defraud each other because the whole system is fraud.
Yeah.
There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So it doesn't matter how many actual physical codes, rules, or regulations are being violated on a daily basis. The entire society is guilty because of the debt-based operation that's going on here. And, and it's not just here in the U.S., obviously, it's worldwide.
Yeah, it's true everywhere.
And so part of the reason for exercising self-determination is to come out of that condition.
Yeah.
Because this is a universal energetic thing. You know, I don't plan on being here forever, but whatever life review or whatever could possibly happen after I get out of here, I don't want to be standing there, you know, or even today have to look in the mirror and contemplate, did you know where those taxes were going? Yes. And you knew they were going to kill people? Yes. But you chose to stay there and do it.
Yeah. You're just as guilty by paying.
That is such a dishonor to my own belief systems that for me to do that, it's like, why don't you just, you know, it reminds me of scenes like in the movie The Last Samurai when they put that little sword in front of him, Katsumoto, basically telling him, and they told him this, you know, save us the trouble.
Yeah.
In other words, go ahead and just kill yourself and save us the trouble.
Yeah.
That became my attitude in doing all of this because I just couldn't stand it. I could no longer stand it. I could not look at myself in the mirror knowing I was participating in the very things that I said were wrong.
Well, and here's the biggest thing I hear all the time is people saying, oh, I don't support the war or anything else. And here's kind of my general response to it. You're paying taxes to the U.S. You know what they're engaged in. You know what they're doing. You're just as guilty as killing those people as a soldier who pulled the trigger. And it doesn't matter if they push the button, pull the trigger, whatever.
And it doesn't matter if you don't pay the taxes, because if you have not assumed your separate and equal station, then you are not separate.
Exactly. You are part of the equal
This is axiomatic. What is it people don't understand about the word separate? You're either in or you're out. There's no fence.
Yeah, there's no half and half.
There's no, I mean, you can try to lie to yourself all you want to. Well, I don't support it, and therefore I'm not a party to it.
That's bullshit.
I'm sorry. What was it Morpheus told Agent Smith? You all look the same to me.
Yeah.
I'm American, you're American, 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 American. You all look the same. American. You all running around going, I'm an American.
Yeah.
So
and
that's called guilt by association, period.
Well, one of the other things that they wanted me to bring up, and again, this is just for confirmation, is things like with, say, the FCC, for example. And I'll use the example of operating a ham radio. You take a look at the FCC rules and regulations, and they state right in there that they only apply to U.S. citizens. So if you're not a U.S. citizen, you are not required by law to have a radio operator's license to operate anything. And that states it in their own statutes.
There is an element of this, though, where when you get into the UN and look at treaties for navigation and communications and things like that, it's always wise to find out what is there on the books, claim it for yourself, do an accession document or whatever you need to do. Because in today's world, everything is going to run by concurrent jurisdiction. There's no more free land out there for people to just go move to.
Right.
So concurrent jurisdiction, when you're dealing with a superior state that has a lot of time, a lot of power, a lot of money, those kind of things, there might be equality among states, but there's still an order of preference, and there's an order of honor that's given to an older state for the fact that they have done what they've done. I don't care if it's in the form of a slave plantation or not. The state being run by those at the top, that's where the honor lies.
Yeah.
And you don't dishonor them in a manner where, like for instance, one of our members on board deals in sewage and septic tanks and all that with the county. Well, if you're a member of another state, like I mentioned about people coming over the border from Canada, they could be a doctor, or let's say take a country like Switzerland, where there's a lot of people that move around either from Switzerland to Germany, Switzerland to France, and they're just driving back and forth every day, crossing borders, crossing border checks or whatever. But you have doctors in Switzerland that are going to practice, they have a practice in Switzerland, France, and Germany.
Yeah.
When they go to France, if they're going to operate on the French cows, then they have to have a French license to operate on the French cow.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
If Switzerland demands that they have that, now if you're sovereign and you have your own land somewhere, you want to set up a medical tourism place, and you decide you don't want to have people around that have those licenses or whatever, that's your choice if they're coming to you. But if you're going to them, see, the great thing about it today, in today's world, is they've built this great big nice commercial system for us to deal in.
Yeah.
It's already here, which is the reason I mentioned variation by agreement or modification of treaty. This is the way we operate. We do these things so that we don't dishonor them, they don't dishonor us, and then we meet the world where the world is, operating in honor, operating in commerce. But no matter what form of payment we decide to take, whether it's yen, yuan, pounds, Federal Reserve notes, or whatever, the liability for the use of that does not stick to us because we don't have allegiance to it.
Right, exactly. And that's like these people that say, oh, well, you're still using the US dollar. And it's like, yeah, that's because of the fact it's a world reserve currency. I don't give a damn what currency is. If the world reserve currency changes, fine, we'll switch over and use that. I don't care. As far as our own internal stuff, we don't have the infrastructure and things like that built up at this point. But when we do, yeah, we will probably be using our own currency.
Who cares?
Exactly.
Who cares what you use? Who cares if you use tally sticks? Who cares if you use poker chips? Who cares what you use?
Yeah,
what difference does that make?
It doesn't matter.
The bottom, I mean, look at Panama. Panama has no central bank.
No.
You know what their national currency is?
I'm pretty sure it's a US dollar.
US dollar. You
Yeah.
think the Panamanian citizens are paying US taxes?
No.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
They're in Panama. They pay Panamanian taxes.
Yep.
If you're a US citizen and you go to Japan and you live there all year and you work there all year,
Guess what? You pay
vote-
Japanese taxes.
you got paid in yen.
Mm-hmm.
You don't pay Japanese taxes just because you're on Japanese soil. Your allegiance is to the United States. You pay U.S. taxes.
Yeah.
You convert the value of the yen into U.S. dollars, put it on your 1040, and that's it.
Yep.
It's about value. It ain't about money. It ain't about currency. It ain't about all this nonsense.
No, it's about value. And it's also about where do your allegiances lie? Where's your nationality? And that's something I was explaining to him the other day is you could have dual citizenship, whatever. The one that really matters is where your nationality is. Because for each citizenship that you take on, you're just adding another jurisdiction. You're not taking away anything, you're just adding more to it. But it's the one that has a higher authority is where is your nationality? Because, oh wait, you're their property. They're the ones that get to decide this is what we're going to do, this is what we're not.
Whether you're deemed to be property or not, that's all based on how the internal workings of that state works. But whether you're deemed to be property or not is irrelevant. It all comes down to the oath and allegiance.
Yeah.
And if you read Book 1, Section 38 in the Law of Nations, it says that the sovereign authority lies with the people.
Yep.
Until such time as they by proxy entrust that authority either to a Senate or to a single person.
Yep.
If they entrust that to a Senate or a single person, then that Senate or that single person is then the sovereign. Period.
Exactly.
You are no
Exactly.
longer the sovereign.
No.
You no longer have any sovereign authority. It was turned over by proxy.
Yep.
So that you could go do your business and then they could run the business of the state.
Yep.
Now, if they decide to do that in honor and truly, do what the Law of Nations says in Book 1, Sections 14, 15, 16, 17, all those areas in there where it talk, all the way up to like 25, 24, 25, where a nation is obliged to protect its citizens and so forth, and that all nation states, just as all individuals, are under an obligation to protect themselves and their institutions, then you got no problem. If that's what they do. It's like reading Plato's Republic. Plato believed that governmental people were not to make enough money. Oh, it's in the Bible too. They weren't to put themselves above their brethren within the society.
Above their citizens, yeah.
You know, there's a great thing in Deuteronomy 17. When you ask for a king, ask for this kind of king. One that doesn't put himself above you, doesn't gather up wives and horses and all this stuff. And it's a reverse of this in 1 Samuel 8, where it says, oh, we don't want a king from among us. We want a king like the rest of the nations have, one that will judge over us and rule over us and fight our battles for us.
Yeah.
Welcome to the USA.
Yeah.
Same old, you know, second verse is same as the first. Same story, same old song and dance.
Meet the new boss, just the same as the old boss.
Exactly. So this is what's happened over time, and it's the reason that they came out with the divine right of kings and all these other kind of things. Those are not the higher principles, even as written in the law of nations. That's not it actually says that any king is not to treat the state as a patrimony.
Yeah.
Meaning it belongs to him and he's the daddy. That's not supposed to, that is not the preferred method.
Right.
But you can't get around it being a preferred method in nation states like the U.S., where people don't really care, just as long as they get to watch American Idol.
Exactly.
Well, what are you going to do with them? Other than, you know, it's like Arthur said, what are you going to do with the herd other than herd them?
Exactly. Well, and it, you know, like you've mentioned several times before, there's two kinds of people in the world, and this is the same thing I've told people too. There's two kinds of people in the world, those that will govern themselves and those that will not.
It doesn't mean, here's the thing, you don't have to know all this up front, but life is about, you know, what is it, as Plato or Aristotle said, you know, the unexamined life is a life not worth living.
Yeah.
So, and I think he also said, what's the difference between the educated man and the uneducated man? The same, and his answer was the same difference as between the living and the dead.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think they put out movies like Night of the Living Dead or shows like The Walking Dead? They're looking at these people going,
y'all are zombies.
yes, you're
dead.
you're ignorant. You know nothing. You know zero. And what you know, if you look at the doctrine of parents per tree and pater per tree, where the king does become the daddy, the whole responsibility of the daddy was to take care of the insane, the lunatics, the idiots, and the incompetents, those that are, quote, non-compos mentis, meaning they can't handle their own affairs because they're incompetent.
Well, it's like, take a look
it's unfortunate to have to talk in these terms, but it is the reason that that things are the way they are right now. And the only thing you can do in this world is deal with the hand that's on the table. Complaining about it is irrelevant. It's the hand you were dealt.
Yeah.
This is the solution. It's always been the solution for getting out from under tyranny or insanity and divesting yourself and not being in collusion with it
not being incompetent.
I mentioned Arthur just a minute ago. I will never forget in 2007 when he looked at me and I was complaining about how many people had stolen money from me along this path, not done what they said they would do or whatever. And he looked at me and he said, so why do you keep clothing yourself with everyone else's dishonor?
Yeah. Well, it's a very valid point.
50 to 60 murders on the weekend in Chicago for Americans, all Americans. Why would I want to clothe myself with all of that dishonor that's going on in New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C.,
LA, Detroit,
wherever?
Yeah, exactly.
It's rampant. You mentioned yesterday when we were talking, and I got this out of another guy recently who was a deputy sheriff down in Fayetteville, North Carolina. 85% of what a sheriff does is nothing but domestic disputes and domestic violence, where somebody's either arguing, causing problems, causing a ruckus, disturbing the peace, or beating each other or stabbing each other. Well, that's 85% of what they do. Why would I even care about a society that's their number one concern of their police forces? To keep the peace, they have to just settle domestic violence all the time.
Exactly.
And how much of that, if you look at what the U.S. has signed, every single bit of that by those individuals, the ones that are causing these problems, the ones that are not keeping what's called the international public order, what they have done is a specific violation of human rights treaties that the U.S. has signed on to. Because those treaties specifically say all men are born equal in dignity and rights, and therefore should conduct themselves as brothers one to another.
Yeah.
Why would my brother be trying to stab me?
Well,
Male or female, we're all brethren. So why would they be trying to stab me? And why would I want to be mixed up and entangled with an entire society that's just rampant in the society? Because it's obvious that it's rampant in the society. And guess what? You and I both know it ain't gonna get any better.
No, it's going to get worse. And that's the thing. You take a look at all the different tensions going on right now. You have the economic, you have the racial, you have all these different things that are going on and are admittedly hot topics right now. And it's people think, oh, give it a year or two and it's going to go away. It's not.
It's never gone away.
It's
never gone away. These are just programs, and unfortunately, it's a choice. Just like in the Matrix, the problem is choice. What was that movie, Transformers 2 or 3, I can't remember which one, where the Decepticon, they wake him up after hundreds of years of sleep or whatever, and he comes out talking about how he's on the side of the Autobots. And they're like, how can you do that? You're a Decepticon.
yeah.
He said all the Decepticons, always fighting war, always causing problems, always trying to destroy a planet or whatever. He said, I changed sides. I'm like, what do you mean you changed sides? He said, it's a choice. It's a highly individual choice.
Exactly. Just the same as the right of self-determination. That
is the reference to the choice, is self-determination. That's the reference to it right there. Same thing in the movie The Matrix. The reference was self-determination, because the choice was to either remain in the Matrix, take the blue pill and go back to sleep, or get out of it, take the red pill and get into what they in the movie called Zion, a separate society, which was going to, once the reboot happened or whatever, the separate society was going to live at peace and march alongside the Matrix for all those that wanted to stay in that Matrix. And if they want to stay there, let them alone. That's their business, not yours. They have the same choice, and that choice is still a highly individual choice. If they don't see it, if you can wake them up, if you can try to wake them up, but there comes a point in time where, you and I both know, even those that come along the path and they start getting educated. I mean, there's been over 100,000 people to 200,000 people who've seen my material over the past probably 8 or 10 years. If they're not willing to make the choice, you can't make it for them.
Well, and not only that,
and you end up having to walk away. And it doesn't matter what level they are. They might, it's like the comment that Richard Allen made about this years ago about self-determination, about the founders pledging life, fortune, and honor. He said, I finally got it. You're either all in or you're not in at all.
Exactly. Well, and to kind of add to that, I met you back in 2012, and I subscribed to your site and stuff like that back in 2012. How many people that were subscribed to your site, just like I was, have actually gone this far and actually done the steps required, versus how many of them have sat back and done nothing?
When we first started the whole program of training and education, and it's never been done before, probably the first time in history that somebody like me has come along and said, okay, let's start training people in international law, because we now have technology and mechanisms of being able to do this, where, like for years, if people wanted to be trained in diplomacy and things like that, they had to go to France and go to a school or university like the Corps Diplomatique or something like that. Now we're much more able to, it boggles your mind sometimes how instantaneous communication has become.
Well, yeah, and
I'm last night talking to Rich in the Philippines, and you know how I call Rich in the Philippines? I pull up Google Voice on my other phone, pop in the number, Google Voice dials this number, and as soon as I answer my phone, it then reroutes it and calls from my phone over the Philippines, and it says this call is being routed by Google. The cost of this call is 12 cents a minute.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Well, and you can do the same thing with Skype or whatever. And it's,
matter of fact, I was on with Kula already this morning over in Australia, because, she's going to be helping Brian with the new education, the new website, even it's always for me, it's even a constant learning process. Because if you get into the UN's audiovisual library and you get into how many resolutions, the amount of information that's being put out on a daily basis is prolific. One person cannot keep up with it. It's impossible.
No, and that's one of the other things too is, you have people complaining about all the way the police are treating you and stuff like that, and they point out it's a violation of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and which is a UN document. Here's the thing though, the U.S. is not signatory to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
It doesn't make a difference if they are. If you belong to that state, and then you say, okay, well, you violated the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, and the judge goes, all right, so what if we did?
Yeah.
What are you going to do now?
Yeah, it's their property.
Book 1, Section 220 says once you reach the age of discretion, if you don't find it advantageous
to remain in it, it is the right and the duty to leave it.
And I like to say remain in it or be punked by it, then you're at liberty to quit it. You're at liberty to get out.
Exactly.
But it doesn't say you're at liberty to whine, gripe, and complain and then sit there and pretend that they're going to change their mind and actually start treating you as anything other than a cow.
Well, and here's the other thing, too.
You can't live in you cannot have a mindset where your mindset becomes dual. And you're looking at case law, and case law says that they are immune from prosecution for doing that very thing to you, and then turn around and try to use a universal declaration that you're not a party to because you didn't sign it.
Yeah. And
your nation state didn't sign it. Where is your standing in state of claim now?
You don't have one.
You have no standing. You have nothing. You have zero.
As a citizen, you have no standing for anything.
Now, if you haven't taken an opportunity to get that kind of standing, and then later on, because of this event that occurred where you're talking about the police or harassment or whatever, does that mean that you have a right to come back and file a tort later?
No.
There is a possibility, maybe. But the reality is that you should have already made that choice, and then you wouldn't have been under that tort.
Yeah.
So who's really at fault now?
You are.
If ignorance of the law is no excuse, who's really at fault now?
You are.
The best thing to do is get out, go to peace. The right of self-determination is written under peaceful settlement. It's specifically reading the Manila Declaration on peaceful settlement or international peaceful settlement of disputes, or whatever it says. What does it say? Peaceful settlement of international disputes. But that's the Manila Declaration, and I'm sure it's in there like at least 4 times. I don't know. The right of self-determination is becoming more and more popular. It's written everywhere now.
Yeah.
So they are literally putting the choice in front of everybody, and they're looking at it going, well, if you're not smart enough to take it, you just bought what you deserve.
Well, and that's like you
brought it on yourself.
It's like you take a look at all these, I call them retarded patriots. And they sit there and point out the second that you criticize anything the government does or anything about the status quo, they always say, well, if you don't like it, leave. Get out. That doesn't mean that you have to physically leave the land. But it doesn't.
Why do I care what they say? I mean, they got no standing to say anything.
Well, no, but it's just a general point, though. It's if you don't like what's going on, get out of it. If you're not in agreement with it, why stay?
I don't get into these conversations. It's like when I was in the churches years ago and I finally got out. I mean, I was not in there long because once I read it and I'm like, I listened to all the double-minded arguments. I'm like, I don't understand this hell thing. What is this thing called hell? Why would your merciful God here? Why would your merciful God want to listen to people screaming and yelling for billions of years?
Yeah.
In some crap you people call hell, especially when your book over here, your Old Testament, keeps saying stuff like, the dead shall know not anything, the wicked shall be as if they've never been.
Yeah.
How are they going to scream and yell? They're going to be as if they've never been. I'm like, this is just double-minded lunacy.
Yeah.
By the way, what was it said? Oh, you said that for me to get immortality and incorruptibility and to get this new body that would be incorruptible and have this whole thing where I would have immortality, incorruptibility, it could no longer be ravaged and hurt and destroyed in some kind of burning hell that you're talking about. To do that, I actually had to bend the knee.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that those that don't bend the knee are going to have that immortality to be able to burn forever?
Yeah.
They don't accept Jesus, but they get immortality? How'd that happen?
Yeah.
So, I looked at the dog, and so the same thing is true of the Patriots. It's true. Governments, as I've said, all governments are religious in nature, and all religions are governmental in nature. Thank you, dear.
Well, and it's...
Hang on a second. We'll pause that for a second.
Okay.
To expound on what I was just talking about, there's a writing in this book of Romans that says you must obey the governmental authorities because all governments are established by God.
Yeah.
Well, that's their little man god called the Pope because he's in that hierarchy. Because they also have a verse in there that says where some disciples or something got beaten for doing what they were told not to do. It said they went, you can't do that anymore. And they said, we must obey God rather than men. Okay, so I come along, I'm asking these questions like, I don't understand. It says obey the government. It says no, obey God rather than men because the government's run by men. Last time I checked. It says, yeah, but it's established by God. So you have to obey the government. I went, all right, well, there's 200 governments on the planet. Which one should I obey?
Yeah.
Or is there some prohibition in here that I can't start my own?
Well, and
Because I'm not liking any of the ones I'm seeing right now.
well,
They have a tendency to abuse their citizenry. I don't care which nation state it's in, or the citizenry itself decides to abuse each other. So
well, you and
in
I
either
both
case,
know.
Why would I want to be in collusion with any of that?
Well, exactly. And you take a look at the Founding Fathers when they wrote the Declaration of Independence and stuff like that. Not all of them were Christian. They were Freemasons and stuff like that. But
Very
yet,
few of them were, so who cares? But,
But
even Masonry is a religion.
here's the point that I'm getting into, though, is they put in there that they get their rights from God. And I think, I don't know because I'm not them or anything else, but I think the reason why they did that is because the fact their fellow man kept saying, oh, you can't do that. You have to get your authority from somewhere. So they said, okay, we get it from God.
Which one?
Well, yeah, but the same general principle.
It's meaningless chatter.
Pretty much. But it comes back to the problem is choice. It's people have to decide on an individual level what they're going to do, what they're going to commit to.
Let me go back to your God thing again here. If you look at what it talks about being born or naturalized in the United States, and the law of nations says that you follow the condition of your fathers. Everybody that's a U.S. citizen, whether they're born or naturalized, they have that oath and allegiance. That oath and allegiance says you cannot have any other oath of allegiance to any foreign prince, any foreign power, or any other foreign sovereign. Well, wouldn't their God be a foreign sovereign?
Yeah.
I mean, they're saying that, oh, well, I'm in the kingdom of heaven, or I'm in the kingdom of God. Well, that would be a foreign kingdom to the United States of America, wouldn't it?
It is now.
Okay, so if you look at it from a very technical standpoint, then whatever their religion is actually in contradistinction to their citizenship and to their nationality, and to that contract called an oath of allegiance. It's a contract. It's an agreement.
Yeah, and see
if you have that agreement, all allegiance means you have a liege.
Yeah.
All of you've pledged all to a liege lord, liege, all allegiance.
Yeah.
And so the reason that it's written this way specifically in the United States oath of allegiance is they don't believe in duality at the top.
No.
If you can't, people say, well, I'm going to go get a second citizenship or whatever. The United States does not care.
No.
They don't care, because if you haven't done anything properly. As a friend of mine, I had a friend of mine build $1 million home down in Ecuador, and he's been down there for probably 5 or 6 years. And he went to go get citizenship, and he's like, "Well, what kind of things should I be looking for?" I said, "You have to look for the fact of whether or not the Minister of Foreign Affairs down there is actually going to be doing the paperwork to send back to the U.S." Now, because I had told him years earlier that if they didn't follow the procedure correctly, then you're not actually out of the system. The U.S. He was a U.S. citizen. And I said, because the international protocols say it must be done this way. And all the states have agreed and they've signed on to that. It's not like the international protocol just sprang out of the ground. I mean, they all agreed to it through their various treaties and declarations that they've all been operating by.
Well, yeah. And
So, what he was at a meeting where President Correa was there, and there was the U.S. ambassador to Ecuador at this meeting. Now, because he's a big, I mean, he does a lot of big business around the world, but he's older. I mean, he's told me a long time ago. He said, if I was younger, he said, a younger man, because he's in his 70s or whatever, he's and not retired off in Ecuador or somewhere else. He said, I'd be on board with you doing what you're doing. But regardless of that, he in this conversation he got into with the U.S. ambassador. They talked in generalities for about 20 minutes, and he finally said, so what's the United States position on all these expats leaving the U.S. going to Panama, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Brazil, wherever they're going? And the ambassador, without even blinking an eye, said, we don't care if they leave. He said, if they don't notice us of changing nationality, they're still our citizens.
yeah.
That means the state has to notice. The state has to do it correctly, not the individual.
Yeah, and it's...
So it goes back to the things that we were talking about. You follow proper procedures, you follow proper protocols. You understand contractual arrangements, and it really comes down to understanding the choice. That's it. Understanding the choice.
Well, and one of the things it reminds me of is, and this is a question I've got quite a bit. Well, when I leave the U.S., when I become a national of Freeport or whatever, it's what about my social security number? What about my driver's license? All that stuff. I'm like, it's null and void. You don't use it anymore. You're no longer
yours anyway. They assign the number; it's theirs.
Exactly, and
quit using it. They're not even ever going to even ask it back. They will never ask it of you to bring it back to them. They don't care. It's a piece of plastic. What are you going to tell them? I lost it.
Yeah.
And people say, well, what about those account numbers? Because those account numbers are bonded, and they write bonds on it.
All that bull crap.
Who cares? Who cares what they do with their system? Who cares? Let them bond it. They say, well, they're using my uppercase name. I'm like, they don't have an uppercase name. That's their name. Look at the Social Security card. It says it's property of the Social Security Administration. That means that the name and the number belong to the Social Security Administration. Who cares? Let them do whatever they're going to do. If they want to continue to commit fraud, they've been doing it for hundreds of years, let them do it anyway. Well, it's not your business anymore.
And kind of, here's my point though. If once you come out of the system and you pledge allegiance to something else, and then you go back and try to use that stuff again, you put yourself right back in their system.
Yeah, you can't cross over the jurisdictions.
No. It's, like you were saying before, you can't have one leg on each side. You can't be 50-50. It's either all or nothing.
There is no fence.
No, it's either all or nothing.
Fence. As that was made very clear to me by an agent that showed up at Kinko's in 2006. There is no fence.
No, it's all or nothing. It's either you're with us or you're not.
We filed that case in the Supreme Court, and he showed up 18 months later asking me, why'd you want to take on an 8,000-pound gorilla anyway? And of course I really didn't. This was me testing the system. And I looked right at him and I said, why'd you want to take on an 8,000-pound gorilla? I went, I didn't. I was just looking for the door out.
Well, and see, it's funny too because...
But, there's sometimes, when you're a forerunner in things, you end up testing things, and if I'd have known back then what I know now, I would have never done any of that.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate for me. I would have loved to have been like John Quincy Adams at age 14 and learn how to be an ambassador to the courts of Versailles or Russia at age 14, because my parents had taught me international law, taught me the law of nations, told me how to operate with decorum and dignity and all those kind of things. Told me what contract was all about, told me how to stand my ground when it came to agreements and things like that at age 14.
Well, and that's one of the big things too, is it's not just about coming out of the system and stuff like that, but when you come out of the system and you pledge your allegiance to something else, you're a party with something else. It's also about educating your kids properly. educating your posterity. This is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to do it.
And you do it for yourself and your posterity. That's what
Exactly.
it's been written many times. Do it for yourself and your posterity.
And that means that you have to indoctrinate your children in the way that they should be, not the way the U.S. wants or whatever other country wants.
You train them in the principles that are going to serve them.
Mm-hmm.
And those principles are not U.S. codes, rules, and regulations. Those principles are found in the law of nations, and they're found in all the different various writings among the legal jurists of how, if you want to operate and do business with immunity, this is how you do it. And why would you leave your kids at a disadvantage when you understand the advantage?
Well, and see, that's how come one of the things I want to do with Freeport, when we get our education system established, is make it mandatory study and mandatory reading of the law of nations. I think it should be a required course.
If you're not doing it with your children, then you're not exercising proper stewardship, because why would you bring them here if you're not going to train them up in the way that it will best serve their interest for the future after you're not here?
Exactly. And not only that, but
if you're going to be like that, just don't bother with them. Don't have any.
Well, yeah.
Let it end with you.
Well, yeah, and that's the other point, too. If you have children and you're not doing that, what kind of society, what kind of state are you going to be leaving them with? Because they get into office because of who they are. What are they going to do with it? Because they haven't been properly trained or educated or anything else.
Look at what the elite do. The elite pass things down to their posterity. I mean, they literally, as they've done with the United States, they leave their posterity entire debtor slave nation states to run.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they leave their posterity, and everybody wants to run around and talk about how evil they are. I'm like, well, they must not be that evil. My dad didn't leave me that.
Yeah.
You know, they trained their children on what they were going to take over. I mean, you can't get, what's that document, The Occult Technology of Power?
Yeah.
I think it was one of the Rothschilds. I can't prove it's a Rothschild, but he's passing on his empire to his successor. But once he picks the one that's going to be his successor, he literally tells him, you and I will now work together for the next 20 years until we become one.
Yeah.
So that you know how to run what I have built.
Well, and that's one of the biggest things with the education system nowadays, especially here in the U.S., is you spend, $150,000, $250,000, whatever tuition and stuff like that is for 4-year college now. You spend that money, you end up in debt, and for what? For information that's 20, 30 years old and not relevant today, how things work today anyway? That's not how it should be. And that's not how it used to be. It used to be that when you wanted to go into a field, you went and you had to intern and become an apprentice and then become a master. And you did that by going out and actually doing the work, not sitting in a classroom reading a book that has old information that doesn't matter anyway. You learn by going and doing it. You learn by hands-on experience, not by sitting in a classroom reading a damn book about it. However, I do think there's certain things that, you need to read the literature and understand the history of it.
The biggest thing you're going to understand about any of this is the maxims, the universal maxims, the things that apply. And then any of the declarations or conventions that have been done on diplomatic relations, consular relations, the Vienna Convention on the Law of Treaties, the bottom line of a society is it's a business like any other business.
Yeah.
It has needs. It has things that need to be done. It has people that need to fill positions.
Yeah.
You're not going to perfect the society by not meeting the requirements of the society.
Yeah.
So it's like anything else. A household is a business. A society is a business. The world is a business. We're here to steward the planet. Somebody's doing something somewhere. So the question is are you going to do it properly? Are you going to just rely on somebody else to do it for you? Are you going to come together in unison and then even elect among each other? How did John Hanson become president of the United States of America before George Washington did?
Yeah.
Well, they voted him into office among even among themselves. Somebody's got to, it's like an Indian tribe. Indian tribes used to get together with a grand council, and then they would appoint a chief out of that. And the chief was taking on the decisions and the whole sovereignty of the council to go exercise what the council wanted done. If he didn't exercise what the council wanted done, they probably killed him.
Well,
especially if he was trying to get gain for himself and sell them down the river.
Yeah.
So depends on what people want. You have a choice.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Not that I can really think of.
Is there any other questions specifically that they asked or whatever?
Well, the specific questions they were asking is like, once they come out of the U.S. system, can they still do like banking and basic business?
Yep, you can do everything.
And that's kind of the point.
Basic business, any dignitary that comes to the United States soil would not do business in their own name.
Right.
They'd set up a corporation, an LLC, or I'm partial to LLCs.
Yeah.
Especially out in New Mexico or Wyoming or somewhere where, like New Mexico, filing a LLC to do business, unless you're running a storefront, they can be a foreign LLC, like a New Mexico LLC is considered foreign to the state of North Carolina. If it's got a storefront like this, it's going to have to get a business license. If it's just doing business over the internet or doing something that's not specifically in that location and only needs to have bank accounts for transfer or whatever, according to North Carolina code and all other code in every other state in relationship to the UCC, LLCs, even though they may be foreign to that state, if they're only doing banking, it's not considered as transacting business in that state, and therefore they don't have to get a business license.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter to the individual anymore, because the individual carries the immunity for their allegiance and pledges.
Yeah.
Even if that LLC, it can be owned by a foreigner. No different than an LLC can be owned by a foreign corporation.
Right.
So what does an LLC do at the end of the year? It does a K-1 distribution statement, and if it's owned by two corporations in Japan and another corporation in Hong Kong or whatever, then any money that's distributed, a K-1 distribution statement just says it's a K-1 statement. The company made $500,000, or let's say the company made $600,000. It's got 3 partners that own this LLC. 2 of those businesses are in Japan, 1 of them's in Hong Kong.
Yeah, so they each get 200,000.
That means each one of them gets 200,000. You do the K-1 for the LLC, and its tax liability just got reduced to 0. It owes no federal, no state tax.
Yep.
If that corporation is not a corporation, but it's an individual that has immunity and doesn't have allegiance to the United States, if it's owned by a U.S. person, then you pay them and they have to pay their personal tax. If you are not a U.S. person and you don't owe them a federal tax, then it all goes to you.
Yep. Yeah, because in fact you pay taxes.
These things are just so uncomplicated.
Yeah, you pay taxes to the country in which you owe allegiance. It's really that simple.
But if you're going to deal with your society, you need to deal with society in honor. As far as the LLC is concerned, it's still a U.S. entity. But these are just things that are tools for people to use.
Yeah. Well, and it
gives you a buffer. It gives you not that you cannot have W-8 accounts in your own name, and it's not even that you can't do business in your own name.
Yeah.
I just don't personally advise it here.
Yeah. Well, and it's, one of the questions I've got is, well, what about if I wanted to work at a job like, say, at McDonald's or Hardee's or something, and I'm just using this as an example. And it says, according to their employment requirements, that you have to be a U.S. citizen with a valid Social Security number and all this other stuff. I'm like, well, technically, if you wanted and they agreed to it, you could still work there. You would just have to do it as a independent contractor.
Yeah, but companies like that aren't going to do that.
Well, no.
Look, employee mindset is a slave mindset to begin with.
It is.
So, you know, if somebody's like giving me that kind of issue, I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah.
I mean, that, you know, you think you're sovereign and you're being told by a manager of McDonald's what to do?
Yeah.